Court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Very good morning to you just after 6 o'clock on Sunday, May the 4th. Yes, I have returned fresh from the elections with some degree of success, may I just let you know. Anyway, great to be here. Thanks ever so much for your company this morning. And as you would expect, it's Sunday, so great news. Today is International Organ Day. It's a day that promotes appreciation for the vast grandeur of an instrument that breathes life into vast spaces, creating intricate melodies with majestic resonance. That's not an organ. Oh, yes, I suppose it is. Also, it's Worldwide Firefighters Day today, a day that celebrates those courageous men and women who put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe.
Well, they call me the fireman. That's my name. Making my rounds all
Wow, you've got a great record collection. Also today, by the way, it's May the 4th. It's Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
20th Century Fox and George Lucas, the man who brought you American Graffiti, now bring you an adventure unlike anything on your planet. Star Wars.
May the Force be with you.
Oh, I thought we were going to watch the whole movie then. Right, let's move on to this morning's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So, today's fascinating facts. On this day in 1675, King Charles II ordered the construction of what? The Royal Greenwich Observatory. It played a major role in the history of astronomy and navigation and is best known as the location of 0 degrees longitude, which has determined mapping coordinates since that time. I live very near there. There used to be a laser that points out from Greenwich, actually, which shows you the meridian, but there you go. It seems to have gone like everything else. On this day in 1882, the birth of Sylvia Pankhurst. Of course, she was an English suffragette. She was the 3rd member of her family to fight for votes for women. Now, unlike her mother and sister, who believed that the vote should be for middle-class women, Sylvia Pankhurst actually wanted the vote for women of all classes. And on this day in 1896, the first British halfpenny newspaper, the Daily Mail, was published. It was the first paper to sell more than 1 million copies and was heralded as the birth date of modern journalism. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, yeah, it's all about the fun. With David and Raj, the day's just begun. The weekend breakfast, see, we found our home.
Well, a very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 6 on Sunday, May the 4th. Yes, he's here. I need a psychiatrist. I brought my shrink with me. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Raj Persaud, consultant and broadcaster. Good morning.
Good morning. The production team were very keen that I come in this morning because they were worried about you. They're always worried about you, but they were particularly worried about you this morning.
I'm sure that's true. Did they tell you to come dressed as Joe 90 with your glasses on?
Well, I understand on social media that people clamouring to see me in my tennis gear because I will be playing tennis later.
Yes, so many people love you in your tennis gear.
I know. But my wife has drawn a line there.
Has she?
Yeah.
So we thought...
She said people are not going to take you seriously. That ship has sailed, I said to her.
Well, that's very true. What about doing a Dr. Raj calendar? You could do June.
Hello.
You could do June in tennis gear. You could do December in skiing gear, couldn't you?
Yes, and shooting.
Shooting.
I have a shotgun.
I'm sure you have. Just in surgery. What would you do in...
NHS managers.
Yes, and what would you do in February?
I have no idea, but the goosebumps, you know, the size of them.
What about April? You could be frolicking amongst the flowers, couldn't you?
Yeah, I play very bad golf. I could do that.
There we are, you see. I think a Dr. Raj sporting calendar, I think that would go down a treat.
Yeah, a strategically placed golf club.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there we are. I think it'd be marvellous. And by the way, Raj, I thought of you when I read this. It's International Organ Day.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have a favourite organ?
The earlobe, actually.
Right. Very good. Very good. Now... I'm just coming on to this particular organ. They've rather usurped me there. But it is International Organ Day, promoted by the Royal College of Organists to encourage people to explore and enjoy organ music. I have to say, there's nothing better than a grand organ. I just think it's just so fantastic to listen to. A psychiatrist would have a field day with your facial expressions at the moment. Anyway, I want to show you this organ because it belongs in my local church. It is very unusual. It is a Tamar organ. It is a 17th century Tamar organ. It's only 8 large-scale organs survived the Civil War, the English Civil War, because Oliver Cromwell apparently disliked them. He didn't like the style of them and ordered them all to be destroyed. There are only 3 of these left in the country, 3 Tamars. One is in Gloucester Cathedral, one is in St Nicholas Church in the hamlet of Stanford-upon-Avon in Northamptonshire, and one is in my hometown. I just realised my shirt's coming apart. It is in my hometown of Framlingham. Amazingly, this was built, we think, as far back as 1630, actually. It predates the Commonwealth, much of this. They rebuilt it in 1898. The cornet had gone missing, and they found it in the rectory in a cupboard. I love that kind of story.
You really are into organs in a big way. I had no idea.
But I think... So this is interesting, actually, when you think about Zelensky and Trump.
Are you sure this is interesting?
Well, I think it is, and we're going to talk about this later. Zelensky and Trump, the solemnity of being in a great cathedral, focusing minds, and I think the same is true of any great church, because the minute you shut those doors, you cut out the... I don't know what's wrong with me today. You cut out...
I do.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Not enough sleep.
Not enough sleep. Can I have drugs? You shut out the noise of the outside world, and then you're left there with your own thoughts.
It's a very interesting idea. In fact, I did write an article about this.
I know you did, because I've got it and I've read it.
Thanks for the cue.
You're welcome.
So there's a theory in psychology called mortality salience. That anything that reminds you of your mortality, like churches, funerals, they met at the funeral of the Pope recently, makes you sort of think about your core values and makes you sort of fight less with other people. So one of the reasons they may have done a deal at the Pope's funeral was because actually they may have been both reminded of their own mortality, and that might have changed their psychology. So it may be the organs, or it may be mortality salience.
Well, let's talk more about that a little later on, but also I think it's because it was impromptu, you didn't have all the pre-rehearsed lines behind you, you didn't have your legions of people whispering in your ear as well, and I think it was a great picture, actually, where the 2 men came together to talk about the broader concerns. But let's talk about that a little later on. Well, as you can imagine, the papers this morning are just full of the elections. I had the most extraordinary, 2-3 days where where I really had very little sleep. I
can tell.
I was on, yeah, you can. I was on BBC One, LBC, other inferior radio programmes, of course, talking about the way the election was going. But actually, this is a great headline in the Sunday Times. Reform, young need a moral re-education. What we're seeing is a realignment of British politics. There is no doubt about that. And it's been quite fascinating to listen to the other major political parties. And I was arguing with ministers and shadow ministers about this, and they are in such denial over the results that came about on Thursday in the early hours of Friday as well. So the article this morning says Reform will begin a campaign to remoralise young people and declare a national emergency on illegal immigration as part of an audacious plan to win power at the next general election. I'm not sure it's audacious in the slightest. Zia Youssef, the chairman, has sketched out the first 100 days of power that would be more transformational than Margaret Thatcher's. He rules out a pact with the Conservative Party. We've seen the Conservative politicians saying, oh, well, we need to do a pact with Reform UK. I constantly and consistently said over Thursday and Friday, we are not doing a pact with the Conservative Party. That is the end of that. And as we know, Reform took control of 10 councils, won 2 mayoral races, got another MP in our ranks, of course, in the guise of Sarah Poachin. And of course, Reform's manifesto promised 20% tax relief on school fees, a patriotic curriculum, a ban on transgender ideology, 2-year degrees, a doubling of the number of pupil referral units so schools can work safely as well. Also, cuts to net zero, green initiatives. This obviously had enormous resonance around the country. And I'll tell you one thing that I find absolutely extraordinary about this is the denial of the other parties. And they literally had the gall to sit there in these interviews and to tell me I was wrong. I was watching the counter. 1, 2, 3, 100, 200, 300, and then we got up to 600, and they still kept saying, well, you know, particularly the Labour front bench was saying, oh, our plan for change is working. And obviously this is what people are telling us. No, they're not. They're not telling you that. They're saying reverse.
I agree, but all that tells you as well, denial being a psychological thing that they're in, I don't disagree with you, is they're out of touch with the public. They're so busy being swanning around in limousines and having meetings with each other that they actually lost touch with what the public thinks, I think. That's what that partly is about.
I would agree. And even Keir Starmer, his response to all of this was, what did he say? I hear you. I hear you. And that's why the plan for change needs to be enacted faster. That is not what people are saying. People are saying, we hate everything you're doing. We hate the fact you stole the winter fuel allowance. We hate the fact you put VAT on private schools. We hate the fact that we're consigned to poverty. We hate the fact that everything is far too expensive. Your net zero nonsense, the madness surrounding that, the woke ideology. What is it about Keir Starmer, without being too rude, where he is so robotic? He's meant to be a bright man, but he seems only able to bring out the same platitudes. He has obviously a menu of lines that he can use, and he rotates them incessantly, and he doesn't seem to have any sense of what the rest of the country is thinking.
But both Kemi and Keir are doing this historic thing of trying not to land themselves in trouble, so they don't really declare policies. All the things about the Reform Party, whether you like them or not, is that they're brave enough to actually say what they believe in, and I think maybe the public are attracted to that. But at least there's a long list of policies here. But can I say that one of the policies I think you should, and obviously people are going to be pitching policies at you, one of the policies is about young people not just having morals, but personal responsibility. Take personal responsibility for your life, rather than blame everything that goes wrong with your life on other people or other things or the government.
I mean, it's interesting, just in terms of reform and where it's going. Yes, I would agree with that, but what we're also seeing is the numbers of young people being attracted to reform. We talked a lot, actually, about young people not having a sort of moral guidance in their lives, whether it's their parents or whether the bad upbringing or whatever it is, or unfortunate circumstances. But when I talk to young people who are flocking in their droves to Reform UK, they like the fact that there is a clear clear direction. They understand that what reform is trying to do is to put the great back into Britain. And I kept using this phrase over the last 2 days, which is we are seeing managed decline of a once great country. We're tearing down statues of people who've achieved great things for this country over the past. We're sticking up ridiculous wonky pieces of art instead. I want to see statues of Fleming. I want to see statues of great figures, historical figures, whether it's Florence Nightingale, for example. That's what I want to see in this country. And not to continually say the British Empire was terrible. We did some bad things, but actually, on the whole, the British Empire did some amazing things too.
Well, great figures in the past remind us of another important point, which is character. Hopefully, what you may be wanting to do is an education system that builds character, builds the kind of people who do the right thing, even when they're not constantly being surveilled by 24-hour CCTV, which is the kind of route we've gone down, which is over-regulation, because we don't trust people. But if you build people to have the right moral character, you can leave them alone to do the right thing.
And that's really interesting, actually, because one of the themes that came back time and time again in the election campaign was trust. People have lost trust with the governing parties. They have lost trust with the authorities, that they feel that actually the streets aren't safe enough. And that's really interesting you say that, because it comes back on the whole idea of what, or the ethos we were grew up to, which is actually, it's about, and I will use this phrase, family, community and country. So you knew who your neighbours were, you watched out for each other, you knew who the wrong ones were. You also had the local Bobby who would go over to the wrong ones, and actually tap them on the shoulder and say, this is not acceptable, clean up your act. That has all gone and been replaced by this George Orwellian society of spying on people with cameras, and that doesn't make you feel safer.
And we've seen it in medicine. In medicine back in the day, we trusted doctors because people who went to medical school and spent 6 years trying to pass exams, theoretically...
Trying being the word.
Yes, I did scrape through in the end. Hard to believe.
I think we both did.
Yeah. Those people, if they had the right character, could be trusted. And now in medicine, we don't believe in trusting doctors anymore. We have CCTV sort of regulation, overmuch regulation. It's all about the paperwork now, actually filling out the paperwork. So the job has become impossible for most doctors.
I would agree. Zia Youssef says there has been an industrial-scale demonisation of young people in this country. They're taught quite deliberately. They should hate their country. They should be ashamed of their country's history, that the United Kingdom had a brutal empire. He also goes on to say this country has one of the most profoundly impressive and decisively impactful histories of any country in the world. These things are not taught and embedded into British people in the way they are in other countries. Go to China, go to Russia, go to the United States of America. Having lived in the United States, and look, it is not perfect by any means, but what I do like about it is they have the stars and stripes in every school. They stand behind what the United States means, whether it's the freedom, the liberty they have, and I want to see far more of that in this country, to stand up for British rights, and actually, I'll go so far as to say, to reclaim Britain from the nonsense that I'm seeing on a daily basis.
But while I agree with you, the notion of greatness is important. The question is, what makes things great? What makes things great is when people work hard, for example, and show great moral character, and overcome difficulty.
Yes.
And so that's a key point. Increasingly, people rely on other people to help them overcome the difficulty, and they blame things like a diagnosis. The reason I'm not succeeding is because I've got ADHD or autism or whatever. So they don't take personal responsibility, and they don't work hard to overcome difficulty, which is where greatness lies, I think.
I would agree. Let's move on and just talk about this article in the Telegraph. Reform UK's first female MP has vowed to stand up against sexual violence committed by illegal migrants. This is what everyone is telling me on the doorsteps. They are sick and tired of the unchecked migration, illegal migration into this country. No one seems to be doing anything about it. Sarah Pochin, the newly elected MP for Runcorn and Helsby, said she was concerned by attitudes of those in migrant hotels, which she said was anti-Western women. She says she's going to stand up for women. It's been brought to her attention by numerous female voters during the by-election campaign. She says we have a problem of houses of multiple occupancy, these HMOs that we talk about. And the hotel we have here that she's talking about in Runcorn, and the private landlord housing that's being used to move them out of these hotels into the community, right next door to you. She says there's a problem for women's safety, and what we need to do is to do something about this. And of course, the idea clear that we need to have a full, thorough investigation into what on earth is going on, and particularly with regards to the rape gangs. And I think the government actually saying that they're not going to have this investigation, a national inquiry into the grooming gangs, is unacceptable.
Well, there's having policies, but there's also enacting policies. One of the reasons why voters appear to be rejecting the government is they think government isn't working. They're not actually able to govern. They're not actually able to make things happen on the ground. And I think the electorate all over the world are increasingly concerned and worried that government is just a gravy train. People arrive in government to make money rather than to actually run things, and run things well and efficiently.
But how much more evidence do you need as a government to actually realise this is a problem for the electorate? They are saying we have huge problems with grooming gangs in this country. The government has dropped the national inquiry into those grooming gangs because they are frightened of the feedback or the kickback that they'll get. And then there's another story that's doing the rounds this morning. Lucy Powell, the Labour cabinet minister, is facing calls to resign after dismissing the grooming gang scandal, wait for this, as a dog whistle issue. It's not a dog whistle issue, it's an issue of keeping our young girls and women safe. She's the leader of the House of Commons. She accused a political commentator of blowing a little trumpet when he brought up a Channel 4 documentary on the subject. This was Tim Montgomery, friend of this programme actually. He said in a discussion about diversity spending by councils on BBC Radio 4's Any Questions, I don't know if you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs. The Reform supporter was then interrupted by Miss Powell, the MP for Manchester Central, said, oh, we want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Yeah, OK, let's have that dog whistle out. Actually, let's pause. Let's get a clip of exactly what happened.
I don't know whether you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs over
No,
this.
we want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Yeah, OK.
There was a real issue.
Let's get that dog whistle out, shall we? Yeah.
OK, Lucy. Yeah. The councils, there were so many people who were so afraid for good. Can I just finish the point, just for 1 minute?
Finish that point, Tim, and then I'll bring in Helen.
Look, there were so many people in local government, in the authorities, who, for good reasons, were worried about upsetting community tensions, that those girls went undefended. Now, there were good reasons, but no one has still been brought to justice for that. So you tell me, Lucy, that this isn't a culture in local government. It's just not true.
Dear. Helen Morgan?
I think it's a total failure to understand how local government operates, actually.
I mean, it's pretty shocking.
Or doesn't operate. Does local government operate?
Well, not only that, the fact is she is so far removed from what people in this country are saying, which is actually, if this grooming gangs scandal is ongoing in this country, we need to know the extent of it, we need a full investigation into it, and we need to make sure it never happens again. And just looking back through all the notes I have on this, Yvette Cooper has announced plans for a nationwide review of grooming gang evidence and 5 government-backed local inquiries. No statutory national inquiry. We've got Labour MPs calling for an inquiry, Sarah Champion, Paul Waugh, for example. We've got Dan Carden as well. 4 in 10 people believe the grooming gang scandal is being deliberately covered up. To talk about being out of touch.
But one of the reasons why the electorate's rejecting the conventional establishment is because what that is about the politics of being too afraid to upset certain groups of people. But sometimes politics is about being brave enough to upset people because you want to believe in a policy and you want to follow it through. You're not trying to ensure that everyone's pleased with whatever you say, because then you end up saying nothing, really, of any real worth.
But they are saying nothing.
Because they're maybe too afraid of upsetting certain groups of people.
But
politics is about being brave enough to...
I think so.
To take the risk of upsetting some people.
Well, let me ask you this question then. Is the rise of Reform and Nigel Farage and those politicians associated with him, is this because actually what they see in Nigel Farage and the other people who surround him are honest people who are not afraid to put their necks above the parapet, their heads above the parapet, to say, this is unacceptable, we need to move on, we need to talk about net zero, we need to talk about the trans ideology, we need to talk about getting cheaper energy. And in some ways that marks a great difference from the 2 main tribal parties.
Well, remember, although it's clear that from the election results reform is on the rise, there's a debate as to exactly why that is. And one of the theories, I'm not going to be popular with you, is that people are not necessarily voting for something.
Oh, don't give me protest votes.
Just let me finish the point. Easy,
Right.
Tiger, easy. That they're rejecting something and they're not voting for something, they're voting against something. That's one of the theories. I'm not saying I subscribe
They
to
are
it.
voting against managed decline of a once great country, Raj, and what they're doing is they're voting for a party that will actually do something about it.
Maybe.
Definitely.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see over the next year or so. We'll see at the next election.
Okay.
But certainly something really transformational is happening.
All right, let me ask
Definitely
you this question. Keir Starmer says, I get it, right? I get it.
And then he presses the accelerator pedal.
And then presses the accelerator. So
into
what's
the
that
car
about?
crash.
What's that about?
Because he has no ideas. That's what was very revealing, the responses of the two main parties. They have no ideas. They have no ideas to come up with in response to the fact of what's happening, I think. You're frowning at
But
me.
he's meant to be bright. So if it goes horribly wrong, I get it. I'm now going to do an emergency reverse, have a think about what we need to do, change policy direction, and maybe get you back on board. That's it. He's not doing that.
Because people have difficulty changing. You talked about being in denial. They're in denial about the fact they need to produce change. I think that's what's really remarkable. That in this dramatic result which says your policies are being rejected, do something about it, suggests an alternative set of ideas.
Well,
and they're unable to think in that way, I think. That's why it may be suicidal to some extent, some of their responses to these election results, I think.
I think it's delusional. Actually, I mean, you can't use that word because it's a proper medical word. But anyway, thanks for the moment. Good morning, this is Colin Doughty. Good morning, David. Well done. Great result. The tide is turning. Reform are on course for the next government. Labour are running scared and now on the back foot. Watch your back as it will now get dirty. What do you mean now get dirty? It's already pretty dirty, by the way. Good morning, David. Steve in Middlesbrough. The local elections gave us hope. The country sent out a Mayday. Mayday. On Mayday, it has lifted a spirits all across the country. Please keep it up. And one more. Tony says the parasitic MSM mainstream media are spitting feathers about Reform UK, storming the local elections. They look so stupid. Let me just ask you this question about Keir Starmer, because he lost. I mean, the depth of and the sort of vast loss that he went through in those local elections is quite something. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. And yet Starmer says, look, I get it. I absolutely get it.
But he doesn't get it, though.
No, it doesn't get it. But I get it. I get it. And then, as Raj says, presses the accelerate button with his plan for change, which clearly is not what people want. So let me ask you this question. What exactly does Starmer think he gets about the country? Actually, what is it that Starmer thinks? 0344 499 1000, course charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. At talkTV. After the break, we'll go through more of this morning's front pages. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
The thing is this, if he was coming over to visit his father, the king, he would get royal protection because he'd be going to the royal estates. So he would be absolutely fine. If he was coming to do proper business, like a state visit, although he's not a working royal anymore, again, there are provisions made from that. But he decided to go be a private citizen in a different country. So if he can now demand legally to have armed protection, then what's stopping Beyonce from doing the same? What's stopping Richard Gere from saying he needs the same? I need my people to carry guns. And he wants the tax, well, he doesn't want the taxpayer to pay for this. He's like, well, I would pay you back.
Welcome back. Lots of messages. Sonia says, I was utterly disgusted by Lucy Powell and how she dismissed the suffering of victims at the disgusting rape gangs. This is like a festering wound in Labour. She should resign immediately. I would agree with that as well. What does she say? A dog whistle when Tim Montgomery said about Labour not having a national inquiry into the gangs. Lots of you getting in touch about that. I also want to talk about the front page of the Sunday Telegraph this morning. Badenoch will not chase Farage to the right. So we've talked a great deal about Keir Starmer. Now, Badenoch, I mean, they got wiped out. I think they lost every single council the Conservative Party was defending. I was on television with Robert Jenrick, and it was really interesting, actually. So he kept saying, oh, I'm going to support... Kemi Badenoch is doing a great job. And I just said to him over the table, is she? I mean, what sort of parallel universe are you on? I know he's got to keep up the side and everything. But this story says Kemi Badenoch will not chase reform to the right, despite suffering a historic defeat. I have lots of issues with this. One is that actually, if you see what reform is doing, it's not just taking votes from the right, it's taking votes from the industrial heartlands, and that's what we saw in Runcorn and Helsby. That's what we've seen across the board, actually, in terms of the councillors that reform picked up. Anyway, Kemi Badenoch will not chase reform to the right, despite suffering a historic defeat in Thursday's local elections. There is a lot of disquiet going on in the backbenches of Kemi Badenoch's own MPs. People are calling for a shadow cabinet reshuffle. And then Farage rubs salt in the wound, saying the Tories will never recover from the historic defeat at his hands. Other colleagues have weighed in behind her and said they are going to support her. But Badenoch admitted herself the Conservatives had suffered a bloodbath, anger over the party's record on immigration. Yeah, I just want to point this out. 746,000 net migrants into this country. Legal. So over 10 years is 7 million people. And then you wonder why you can't actually get to see a GP or you can't see a dentist. And then just in terms of where she goes from here, it's interesting just listening to some of the noises off, and people are saying, well, actually, we don't need to, we shouldn't tack right, because if you actually tack right, then we're not going to actually be able to outflank them. I was just looking here what Sir Edward Lee, the father of the House, said the Tories needed to take on reform by being as tough as Farage on immigration and net zero. It's very difficult, actually, to outflank Nigel Farage if you actually try and play on the same pitch that he's on, I would suggest.
Yeah, but there's a lot of psychology behind this phrase, chase reform to the right, right?
Okay.
And the psychology is that we're not going to do something, they said. I'm not interested in what you're not going to do. I'm interested in what you are going to do. So that tells you something about the bereftness in terms of no ideas over there. But Badenoch was elected by the party, right? So she may be popular within the party, but is she popular with the electorate is the deeper question. Are they actually able to think about that within the party? We need to pick a leader who's going to be popular with the voter, not just with, you know, regular Conservative members.
Or maybe a leader that leads.
Yeah.
So what exactly does she stand for?
Yeah, well, clearly, again, the psychology of we won't chase them to the right is about what we're not going to do.
Right. So what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? But also...
So what are they going to do?
But they're trivialising what's really going on by saying it's just a race to the right. It's a way of trivialising it. Well, rather than thinking more deeply about coming up with a better set of policies that might be more attractive to the voter. All of this is really a trivialisation of the voter, a constantly ignoring of the voter, basically.
And that's interesting. So Lord Maud, a former chairman, said the party was a phoenix It is not a dodo. It will rise from the ashes sooner than people think under her leadership. Is that denial?
Yeah, I think so, to a large extent. Again, they're not asking themselves, and this is about psychology in a sense that we find it very difficult to look at ourselves, don't we, and see our flaws. But the best way you can improve at anything, like trying to win stuff, is to be aware of where you're going wrong and own up to where you may be going wrong. And I think they find it very difficult to do that for all sorts of reasons to do with the spin doctors around them. So whatever you do, don't discuss where you're going wrong. But actually, it might be refreshing honesty, I think.
Yes, but many of my friends, Conservative friends, and I do have some, they phone...
You have friends?
I do have some friends. And some of them... Well, I know that. I know that's... Well, that's right. They're fair weather friends, but anyway. They have phoned me to say reform is a flash in the pan, that actually all these voters will come back to the Tories. They are delusional, because what I'm hearing on the doorstep is I'm a lifelong Labour supporter or I'm a lifelong Tory, and I've given up with both main parties. We keep oscillating from one to the other. They lie. They blatantly lie about what they're going to do. Labour, great example. We are not putting up taxes. What did you do? You put up employer national insurance contribution taxes. So I'm seeing pubs closing because they can't afford to employ people. We've also seen energy skyrocket. We were told that energy bills would be £300 cheaper. Can you tell I'm now going off on one? But they're not. They're £300 more expensive. You've got Mad Ed Miliband paving over agricultural land with solar panels. That's not what people want.
But the other dangerous thing they haven't seen is one of the reasons why third parties find it difficult to get traction historically in British politics was because voters thought there's no point voting for them. They're never going to get in. It's a wasted vote. And now an idea has arrived, which is if you vote for them, they might actually take power. So they don't realise the floodgates may have opened in terms of what a third party may be able to do as a result of these recent results, and maybe they're blind to that big psychological point, which is actually there may be a lot more dissent or dissatisfaction with traditional politics out there because people didn't vote for a third party because they just thought a third party's got no chance anyway. So
but now they see, and that's really interesting actually. Do people like to back a winner?
Yeah. Or are they afraid of a wasted vote? They won't think a vote for reform will be a wasted vote, or this particular third party will be a wasted vote in the future.
So the Conservative Party kept using this against reform in the run-up to the election. A vote for reform is a vote for Labour. But our riposte is a vote for the Conservatives, is a vote for Labour. And that has really undermined them and it's unseated them and they don't really know how to respond because it's true.
But also a third party has also struggled because they never got enough media attention compared to the other two, and that's completely changed. I mean, reform are actually on the agenda, actually, in a major way than before.
I mean, but that's also interesting. I mean, I think Nigel, and obviously I've been involved in many of those big events. We did one the other night, actually, in Kent. But Nigel has learnt a great deal from Donald Trump and the art of showmanship and the idea that you have those rallies. The one that I hosted in Birmingham had 10,000 people there. I'd love to see the Tories try that.
But can I just make again at the risk of balance?
You're going to, yes, at the risk of balance.
Which is that it is quite easy to criticise the establishment, and you should do.
Yeah.
But governing is difficult.
I agree.
Own up to the difficulty of producing some of the changes you want to make.
So in local council, and I totally agree with you. So the local councils, the ones that were contested, have £12.5 billion in debt. So the interest every single day, I think it is £1.3 million. So then the question is, the proof of the pudding is in the eating thereof, is how does reform now turn round those 10 councils they have won and to make sure they don't disappoint the voters that voted for them?
So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next year or so. But governing is difficult, electioneering is much simpler.
You say that. Good morning, David and Raj. I love Raj. Who's this? Have you taken your tablets this morning? This is Brian in Worthing. He's as sound as a pound. Have you met him? Anyway, I gazed into my crystal ball this morning and what I saw was the future where Labour and Conservatives were in the wilderness and all in homes for the bewildered, where they're still working out how to stop the boats and achieve net zero. I hope I'm still around to see it. Great show, mate. Thank you, Brian in Worthing. Just one for you here, Pat from West Sussex. Good morning. David, could you please explain what a dog whistle argument means? Raj, do you want to explain
A dog whistle argument is about an idea. It's a political abbreviation much favoured by spin doctors. about an idea that you're saying one thing, but underneath it, you're getting at something else. Often something politically unacceptable to say out loud, but the electorate understand what you're really saying. In this case, is something about maybe certain immigrant groups could be quite dangerous. And in saying it, or the dog whistle idea is the idea that there's something going on underneath it, which is why it's quite interesting psychologically. There's something going on underneath the statement, which is darker or more politically unacceptable to say, but you're kind of like, because a dog whistle, dogs hear it, but humans don't. So that's the idea.
He's good, isn't he? He's very good. Pat, I hope that helps. And Pat also goes on to say, really interesting show. I'm really enjoying it. Thanks very much. And Andy in Knott says, happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. We'll take a break. After the break, I want to talk about net zero, because this came up on the doorstep a great deal. I also want to talk about inheritance tax on farmers. I had a massive blazing argument with one of the Labour ministers about this, and I also had another blazing argument about the imposition of VAT on private school fees as well. We'll talk about that after this break. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Welcome back. Lots of messages coming in. Good morning, David. Belated happy birthday. I'll be celebrating mine next Sunday in the Maldives. What a fantastic election result and typical response from the cloth-eared legacy parties with their heads in the sand, as usual. Sean in Gloucester. Happy birthday. By the way, you're not late, because my birthday is actually on Friday. I shall be 87 and I won't be here next weekend because I will be changing...
Having an operation.
Yeah, I'll be like that. I'll look like I've been in a wind tunnel after that. Anyway, happy birthday to you, Sean. We'll talk about this in a minute. Neil says, good morning, doctors. Love to get Raj's take on the Harry interview. We'll talk about that.
I do want to talk about that.
It's really fascinating.
Very psychological.
Very psychological, and also he desperately needs help, in my humble opinion. But anyway, I probably can't say that. Vince.
You just did.
Oh, did I? Oh, yeah. I think I'm punch drunk still.
Some of what you're thinking is coming out loud.
Is that right? Yeah. No, I'm punch...
No filter.
No, I think I'm punch drunk because I've gone from being a political pundit into going back to hosting a show. So, forgive me if my brain isn't quite 100%. I also haven't slept very much. Vince says councils where reform have no majority will form coalitions to thwart the reform councillors. The politics of spite have arrived. Oh, yes, make no mistake about that. Now, this is interesting because on the doorstep, one of the biggest issues was net zero. The government is still going headlong into this quest for net zero by an arbitrary figure of 2030. By the way, I looked on the National Grid Live, which is where you can see how much electricity we're generating from renewables and other sources. Now, the other day, when it was absolutely roastingly sunny, we were still using 60% 50% of our energy was coming from nuclear, it was coming from fossil fuels and gas and interconnectors, i.e. not from this country, coming across the channel. So very little was actually coming from wind and from solar. Now, this is going to be interesting because Reform UK has declared war on net zero developments in the countryside. Richard Tice, the deputy leader, said the party will use its new control of 10 councils to use every lever available to block renewable projects. He says, I'm going to write to them again saying, now we've won these elections, you need to be under no illusion. This is war. We will wage war against you, your people and your terrible ideas. If you think you're going to do this in the county of Lincolnshire, which he represents, then you're going to regret it. You're going to waste your money. It is going to be very painful financially, so you might as well take your money and your daft ideas elsewhere. Now, he says there is no doubt there is a mandate now to lose the to lose the net zero madness. And what is interesting about this, of course, we're talking about these great solar farms, the wind farms offshore. They want to shove pylons across my neck of the woods in East Anglia, also in Lincolnshire. And Richard Tice went on to say, basically, you have to bury your pylons. So the Reform outlined its energy policy in February, including taxes on the renewable sector and new laws blocking new pylons from being erected. He says any new cables in Lincolnshire must be put underground or around the wash offshore. He said it will be the smarter and the quicker thing to do. It's war, Raj.
Yeah. So the net zero thing, as you said, was arbitrary. And why did they pick this particular year? Where did that come from?
Well, it was 2050 originally, wasn't it? And then it was enshrined into law in 2030, but without any sort of thought for how we might get there. And of course, the intervention by Tony Blair wasn't exactly helpful to Labour 2 days before the elections. And if you remember, he said it's unachievable, and I would agree with him. What we need is oil and gas licences. You need to frack, you need to build nuclear power stations. You have to have a transition. You don't suddenly wake up and wear Hessian underwear and you don't have a fridge freezer. I mean, it's just nonsense.
But it's another example, isn't it, of a kind of top-down thing, which is the establishment think net zero is a great idea. They're not really listening to ordinary people's concerns, what it is on the doorstep that's really bothering them. And so they feel that the government's drifted away from the concerns of ordinary people.
Well, they want cheap food. And there is no developed Western country that has actually increased its economy by having high energy prices.
Yeah, and that British Steel might have been in trouble, partly because of that. Because it's a very energy-intensive industry.
Of course. And again, this is the interesting thing about reform. And so we're being, reform is being characterised as being a right-wing party. Well, how does that stack up with actually the reindustrialisation of Scunthorpe, for example, saying it needs to remain British, it needs to be kept going because it's the only plant in this country that makes virgin steel, which is absolutely paramount. The idea you switch to electric arc furnaces is so fanciful and ridiculous, and you can't actually... And the end product isn't actually what you want.
But going back to the psychology of denial of the establishment parties, remember the Conservative Party's been in Parliament more or less from the time Parliament really started, right? So they see it as a club that they're a member of, and they see themselves as entitled to always be there. That's what they think. They think in that way, and that's another reason why they might be in denial at the revolution that may be coming in terms of what voters really want.
I would agree, totally. And in fact, I've had many of my friends calling me saying, call this off, it's absolutely ridiculous, it's a protest vote. Well, they're going to get a nasty shock, aren't they? On the front page of the Sunday Telegraph this morning, there is a picture of Dame Mary Archer, who looks absolutely amazing. She's 80 years old. She looks absolutely incredible. So, Dame Mary Archer, wait for this, she's been sacked from the board of Ed Miliband's Net Zero department in what has been described as an attempt to suppress all opposition to his policies. Now, you may remember, actually, she's a very clever lady. She not only is the wife of Lord Archer, but she also has a big scientific background. She was summoned, apparently, to the department to be told she was being removed from her position. And this comes... how surprisingly, just days after Tony Blair said the government's net zero policy was doomed to failure. She apparently is broadly sort of in agreement with Sir Tony's assessment of government policy. So it is clear to me that Ed Miliband is trying to usurp his authority to basically stamp down on any dissension in the ranks. They clearly don't want to listen to what other people have to say. I actually think Ed Miliband's days are numbered. I think he'll be out in the first reshuffle.
Maybe, but why is this story such a big story in the papers? Who leaked it? You see what I mean? Who made it happen? What's the agenda going on behind that, actually?
Well, that's a very good point. Interestingly, I was just looking at her background. She spent 15 years as a lecturer in Oxford and Cambridge universities. She has a significant number of energy-related publications to her name. She actually knows what she's talking about, and that's the last thing you want, isn't it, if you're a government minister? You don't want anyone who knows something. I mean, it is like an episode of Yes, Minister.
Well, you need people who are dissenters. You need people who are people, you know, say no to things and make life a bit difficult for you if you're going to run the country properly, rather than be surrounded by yes people who just want to advance their political career and get in the House of Lords.
Yes, but Claire Coutinho is right. Obviously, she was Tory Secretary of State. She said since Ed Miliband's been in charge, his department has made scientifically illiterate claims about heat pumps, refused to provide any evidence that Ed's ideological plans will cut bills by 300 quid. In fact, what he needs to do is to bring in more scientists. I would agree. If you are going to come up with an idea that we're going to get to net zero, shouldn't you at least first check with the scientists that it's actually practicable, reasonable and cost effective?
Unless you have an ideological position.
Which is where we are.
And therefore the science may be inconvenient. And therefore you ignore it, basically.
Right. I've heard that before with other issues as well. Let's pause just for a moment. I want to talk about farmers, actually. It's the front page of the Sunday Express, sorry. Heartbroken farmers are now suicidal. We'll talk about that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Making sure that they're in 2-star, 3-star, 4-star hotels is attracting people. We're basically creating a magnet for these illegal migrants to come here into this country.
So was that a yes? Still stick them in tents in the middle of a cold spell?
But the point
it's just inhumane. Where are you coming from? How far have we gone down the drain as a population that for the most part care?
Jim,
the most part care.
The point is, I think that many people, of course, do care, and nobody would say that children should be allowed to be in tents across the country in that way. But fundamentally, we have allowed millions of people to come into this country illegally. Many of them, some of them, a proportion of them, on small boats.
It's not
millions illegally, not millions on small boats.
This is Talk 652 on Sunday, May the 4th. I thought it was Saturday earlier on. Anyway, good morning, David and Raj. This net zero nonsense is just a ploy to impoverish and control the people. It's also to make certain already rich people richer still. That's Dean in Dagenham. Good morning to you. Good morning, my lollies. What? Laney in Essex, you're a lolly now. Good morning, my lollies. I think that's meant to say lovelies, but anyway. Good morning, my now I've lost it. Good morning, my lollies. Quick question. Is it possible that Labour can force migrants and cut budgets of reform run councils? And cut the budgets of reform run councils. If so, what can be done? Thanks, great show. It's a statutory requirement to house migrants, which is forced upon the local councils. I don't think they can. I mean, in theory, they could cut the budgets of the councils. Already the councils are struggling. Good morning, David. I love the shirt. This is Julian. Good morning to you. Thank you very much. It appears the whole cabinet has had the further and faster chip fitted. They're like Doctor Who's Daleks roaming the newsrooms, chanting further and faster, further and faster, further and faster, which of course is the political jargon for exterminate. My favourite show. That was quite good, wasn't it?
Yeah,
my favourite show growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the shirt. I'm glad you did the button up, because earlier on I was wondering whether you were inside the shirt trying to get out or outside the shirt trying to get in.
I thought it looked a bit louche.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. This is an awful one. Good morning, David. I'm 70. Last winter I was so cold that I really didn't want to be here and face another cold winter. Now I will, if I bloody will live long enough to see reform in power. Love you all. That's Pat. Pat, I'm so sorry. I mentioned this the other day on one of those election programmes, just saying, I can't remember who it was to. I think it was the Lib Dems. It was just totally unacceptable. It was cruel, actually, what the Labour government did, which was to take away the winter fuel allowance, because they didn't suffer. But I know lots of people like yourself did suffer, and I think it's totally unacceptable. This is, who's this? Made to Shine. Good morning, David and Raj. Fabulous start to my Sunday morning, watching you both. This is Michelle in Altrincham. Good morning, Michelle. The question Keir Starmer doesn't get implies that Keir Starmer is missing the point on a key issue, be it public sentiment, policy effectiveness or political strategy. He seems to be avoiding the elephant in the room. Well done, reform. And all very happy birthday. Interesting, he did not campaign in Runcorn. What's the psychology behind that, Raj?
Yeah, well, he was obviously afraid of colliding with a voter and hearing what a voter might think.
Or what they may do to him. Yes. Let's take a call. Ken is on the line from Kent. Good morning.
Good morning. What a prescription. That doctor is best one I've had for a long time.
Me or him?
Don't get so competitive, David.
I am competitive. No, I know. Anyway, Ken.
The guest you have there, what he actually has produced here is a balanced view.
Yes.
And what his replies are always thoughtful, and what that produced is fault from us. And it's brilliant. I love it.
Oh,
anyway, I only disagree with one point.
I knew this was coming.
I like this one.
I like this.
Come on, then.
Very manipulative.
He gave you lots of platitudes and then he's taking it away.
Very clever.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Right, let's listen. Right, voting not for someone, but against someone. I totally disagree with that. I believe we have now gone beyond that. This is the Cromwell moment I talked about last year on Talk. We're now seeing the revolution begin, and people are fed up with the lies. They want the truth. And it appears that reform took the truth. And that's what people have been waiting for. So you've now got what I predicted would occur last year, the Cromwell moment occurring. And you won't stop it, Doctor, because for too many centuries we've had too many lies. And energy is one of the biggest lies we've ever been given. This idiotic policy needs switching off, like a light switch. It's as easy as that. It needs turning off no matter what we do on energy. And you can see that by what's occurring. 60% of energy still being produced by nuclear and gas. And it's made no difference the 40% that we're producing on your electricity price. And the reason for that, and I'll go back to it again, I've talked about this before, John Penrose, MP, Western Super Mayor, linked the price of electricity to the international price of gas.
Correct.
And you can do whatever you want all day long until you remove that policy, which is still there. You're never going to get cheap energy for as long as you live.
And the key to that, is the renewable companies are coining it in because the price of electricity is pegged to the price of gas. You have got it right.
Exactly. And that's why they've all been given big fat subsidies by the Tories, and continued with the Labour, and they're getting money for doing nothing that's going to make your energy, electricity, any cheaper. Now, the thing about the reform you've got a problem with now, being voted in, I agree again with the doctor on this point, is it's all very well jumping up and down saying you're going to do this and this. You've got a big problem there with a 12 billion debt with all these councillors with their idiotic ideas, bit like HS2, bit like smart motorways. It's all going to now have to be paid for. And I actually got a lot of sympathy for reform, because what you've got now is a big fat company, which is this country, with a big fat debt. I don't know what you're going to do about that. Best of luck.
Yeah, thanks. That's brilliant. Thanks, Ken. Always good to talk to you. That's Ken in Kent.
What you're hearing there is frustration and anger. And I think the Reform Party is tapping into that. But the other thing you're hearing there...
also trust.
Yes, also, but the other idea is that the system's rigged, and some people have got their snouts in the trough, and they're all in on it, and the system's rigged against the ordinary voter. And I think that's another thing you're hearing between the lines in terms of what people are saying.
I would agree. I've just had a very strange message. I hope you're all enjoying the lovely bank holiday weekend. This is Geraldine. Could you please ask Dr. Raj, are you going to see the Red Shoes at the old cinema tomorrow?
Oh, it's one of the old cinemas, one of the old films at the Regent Street Cinema. 1 p.m. every Monday they show a film. I can't tomorrow. But
Geraldine was hoping for a hot date, I think. Oh, not tomorrow then?
No. But every Monday, 1 p.m, Regent Street Cinema, they show an old film, an old classic.
How wonderful.
Yeah.
Right, thanks very much for the moment. After the break, we'll go through all of this morning's front pages. I promise we'll do that. I want to talk about farmers being pushed to the brink of suicide by Rachel Reeves' tax raid. Also, lots of other very interesting stories this morning. I want to talk also more about Prince Harry, because, of course, he's issued this rather strange outburst about King Charles, and they've been called poor taste comments. We'll talk about all of that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning!
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 7 o'clock on Sunday, May the 4th. I'm David Bull. I have returned from the political fray to be with you here this morning. Great news, though, as you would expect, because it is Sunday. It's International Organ Day. Yes, it is. It's a day that promotes appreciation for the vast grandeur of the instrument that breathes life into vast spaces, creating intricate melodies with majestic performance. Now that's an organ. That's Bach. Tempest a fugue? Anyway. Also today is Worldwide Firefighters Day, a day that celebrates thank you, courageous men and women who put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe. So, Worldwide Firefighters Day today.
He's always on the scene. Fireman Sam, and his engine's bright and clean. Fireman Sam.
You can tell how old all of the people are in the control room. Also, today it's May the 4th. So that means it's Star Wars Day. Yeah, may the Force be with you. And on that note, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So this sounds fascinating facts. On this day in 1780, the first derby was run at Epsom. The winner was Diomed. The idea of the race was first discussed in 1778, 2 years earlier, at a house party given by the 12th Earl of Derby, and a toss of the coin settled the name. The other founder was Sir Charles Bunbury. So there you go. It could have been called the Bunbury. There we are. Also, on this hour, in 1904, a provisional agreement was signed in Manchester's Midland Hotel by the Honourable Charles Rolls, seller and repairer of motor cars, and a chap called Henry Royce. Now, he was an electrical engineer and builder of a single motor car. Now, in 1907, the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost was the first of their many luxury models. Rolls-Royce. On this day in 1953, the Duke of Edinburgh was awarded his pilot's wings during a private ceremony at Buckingham Palace. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Waking up, oh what a sight. David Bull's got the groove just right. Fascinating facts, start your day. With Dr. Rauch, we laugh and play.
There we go. With Dr. Rauch, we laugh and play. Good morning to you. 5 minutes past 7 on Sunday, May the 4th. Dr. Rauch Prasad, my own special psychiatrist, with his huge medical bag, is here with me this morning.
And we do need it.
And we do need it.
There's a team of pharmacists just waiting outside.
Are they? Yeah. Yeah. Huge prescriptions. Now, David, calm down.
Yes, calm down.
Well, calm down. Well, no, I'm celebrating, obviously.
Clearly.
Well, clearly.
That's one word for it.
Well, no, I am. I mean, I'm also slightly punch drunk in that I haven't had much sleep over the last few days, so I'm delighted.
And we've talked about how important sleep is.
Sleep is important.
Very important.
Yes. For cognition. For memory.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I can't remember it.
Yeah, and for staying calm.
And for staying calm, which I'm clearly not. Anyway, Dr. Raj is here this morning. We're talking about all of the big stories in the news. This is quite interesting. Obviously, we've been talking about the council elections, the by-election, also the mayoral elections. And actually, most people aren't very interested normally in local council elections. But I think...
Because they're so predictable. And
no, people are really... Local elections are not sexy. Let's get that out there. But actually, people were absolutely captivated by what was going on, and particularly, I think, the by-election that took place. I think also the mood of the country is so angry against the government, and I'm not saying that from a party political point of view. I'm saying from what I'm hearing on the streets. People are so angry. What they wanted was the government to get a bloody nose, and it did.
And that's the power of democracy. It's great that people get a chance to vote and therefore say something, and politicians need to pay attention to that. But they're not. It looks like.
They're absolutely not. The front page of the Sunday Times, I will just talk about this quickly. Reform, young need a moral re-education. Reform will begin a campaign to remoralise young people and declare a national emergency on illegal migration. They say this is all part of the plan to win power at the next general election. I'll put money on it. I think Nigel Farage will become Prime Minister. I said it here. Today sketches out the first 100 days of power. Farage will be more transformational than Margaret Thatcher, according to Zia Youssef, who is the chairman of the party. As we know, Reform took control of 10 councils, won 2 mayoral races, add a 5th MP to its rank. Also, what he's going on to say is actually they want to have a patriotic curriculum, a ban on transgender ideology in the classroom, 2-year degrees and a doubling of the number of pupil referral units so schools can work safely. Also, they want to get rid of net zero and green initiatives and stop people working from home. Now, also, at the same time, another paper this morning, I think it is the Sunday Telegraph, says, I mean, it's clear that actually the other two parties, Labour and the Tories, simply don't know what to do. Actually, they look like they've been hit by a truck overnight when those results started to come in. I think many of them couldn't quite believe, actually, the results that were happening. I was sitting in the BBC studio just watching the ticker going up, the number of councillors that Reform was getting, also the way the councils were swapping over, and then, of course, the Conservatives lost control of every single council they were defending. Now, you would think that Kemi Badenoch would think, oh, maybe I actually need to be out there and saying about policy. Maybe this is what we're going to do, because she's been very quiet. And now, the headline in the Telegraph this morning, Badenoch will not chase Farage to the right. So what exactly are you going to do, Kemi? And we know that Robert Jenrick is not particularly happy, although he, in public he is actually saying, I'm fully behind what Kemi Badenoch is doing. It is a moment where I think both main parties have to look at themselves in the mirror and think, right, how are we going to move on from here? I think it is also, I'm putting myself back in my box here, which is we still have a long way to go until a general election.
But you also mentioned you were there watching the ticker tape and the number of votes coming in and the number of people being... What did it feel like for you? Did you believe it? Were you surprised? Were you actually thinking, I can't believe this is going...
Well, so the intel I had was that we thought we had a certain number of councillors in terms of the numbers. But it was just priceless.
From private polling? From
our polling, yeah. So,
but you don't know whether to believe the polling.
Exactly.
Till the results
and there's
came
no
in.
exit poll, unlike a general election.
So did you have to pinch yourself? Did you think, am I dreaming? Or you thought, no, this is exactly what I thought was going to happen?
It was exactly what I thought was going to happen, but it happened faster than I thought it was going to happen. And so then also I set the scene by saying, if we get over 200 councillors, that is a great night for us. Thinking, if we get to 400, that is a really good night. But then when it got to 600 or whatever it was just extraordinary. And then watching the councils. And then, so here's the thing, when we got to Runcorn, I could see the pictures coming in from Runcorn, and I knew it was close from what I was being told. My phone was red hot, it was melting on the desk in front of me. And then I then got a message to say that we had won by 4 votes. And then Labour demanded a recount. And at this point, I thought, I have to go to bed because I have to be back up again in about 5 hours to be back on television. And so then they had the recount. I went to bed and I woke up to find we'd won by 6 votes. So the recount actually gave us 2 more votes than we originally had.
Yeah, and I think it's the closest result in
living memory.
Yeah, amazing, yeah.
Amazing. I'm really delighted for her as well, and actually I think she'll do a great job, former magistrate as well, and much going on. But it's interesting. I'm asking this morning in terms of Keir Starmer. He says, "Oh look, I get it." And then he says, I'm going to push on with my plan for change. And as Raj says, so I get it, but I'm going to press the accelerator.
Into the car crash that I've just seen.
Yes.
Further.
So what's the psychology of that?
Well, like I said before, one of the interesting questions is, are these people able to get out of the limousines and the offices they hang around in and the bubble they're in and understand what the ordinary voter thinks? And are they willing to address what the ordinary voter thinks or wants, or are they too caught up with other vested interests around them?
And what's the answer?
Well, the answer is they certainly have got to start thinking hard about change and doing something different. And that will make politics more robust and interesting, I think, if they can actually come up with some interesting responses rather than just simply say it's more of the same.
I'm sorry, I just got sent a message by Jacob Rees-Mogg, actually. So the question I'm asking this morning is, what exactly does Starmer think he gets about the country? What is Starmer going to do? Also, is Starmer really listening? 0344 499
Well, another point about that is that it's so fast how Reform have done. They may be in denial about it because of the sheer speed.
I think they are.
In terms of how fast Reform have come from nowhere.
So that's quite interesting because, for me, as the news came in that we had won various things, it took me ages to process that. And I assume that's also to do with the way that memory is laid down. And the shock, I suppose, of knowing how well we'd done. And then we won Greater Lincolnshire, of course, with Andrea Jenkins. And then I was waiting to see what happened in Hull and East Yorkshire. We knew it was tight. And at one point, we thought we were going to win the West of England with Aaron Banks. And then, obviously, we didn't. It would have been very hard to do that. What is going on psychologically where I actually found it incredibly difficult to process that amount of information?
Well, it exceeded your expectations, didn't
Yes, it
actually?
did.
OK, but you were very optimistic to some extent.
I was.
So you were more in touch with what ordinary voters thought, because I think...
Well, that's because I'd actually bothered to go out and talk to them.
Yes, that's right. That's something to Keir Starmer. You see, he should have done that. The next day should have been TV cameras with him knocking on doors or talking to ordinary voters.
Yes.
And getting a sense that... But he's scared of meeting an ordinary voter.
Well, of course he is.
And getting a piece of their mind.
Well, that's right. And, of course, I think that's where, and I would say this, wouldn't I, that actually Nigel Farage, if you remember, he's had all sorts thrown at him, the milkshake, for example, in Clacton and so on, but he will still go out there. He's in the pub. He's having pints of beer. Actually, quite a lot of beer most days. But he's having pints of beer with the electorate, and they like that. They see someone like them.
Yeah, also speaking a language that they understand, I think.
Yes.
So I think that's important as well.
Keep all your messages coming in. David, excellent show this morning. Thanks very much, Mike in Shropshire. Sensible, incisive, and Raj is brilliant. Lovely shirt. Thank you very much. I'm glad it's buttoned up now. I know, it was a little bit loose at the beginning of the show. Starmer's response, this is Robin Wiltshire, says, was utterly pathetic, but also music to us Reform voters' ears. Hopefully he'll stay leader, which will ensure Labour continues to lose elections. Will he go, do you think?
No, I don't think so, because there's no alternative that's as high profile.
What about Streeting?
Is he really as high profile? Do people really know who
He
Streeting is? OK, all right, well, yeah. Maybe. No, I don't think so. I don't think there's anyone also lining themselves up to be a rival. That's a sign that you'll know change may be coming, when you see people running their own personal private campaign, I think.
Good morning, David and Raj. This is John in Rugby. You keep going on about the cost of energy. What about the cost of AAA batteries? I use a lot of them because I have to keep muting my TV because I can't stand the sound of Starmer. Great show as always. Thank you very much, John in Rugby. David, please can we have the delightful Raj Prasad on your show every weekend? Great conversation, great humour, great show. No. Gorgeous people. When will political commentators talk to the real people of this country? I'm just above the benefit level and don't have a rich family. Migrants are better off than us. They don't pay bills like we do. Karen, age 73. Migration is going to come back. Illegal migration is going to come back and bite them very hard. So 38,000 people still waiting to be processed, being paid for by the British state, £6 million every single day. What are we doing? There is no plan. In fact, the number of illegal migrants that have come to this country is 11,000 already this year. So Keir Starmer hasn't smashed the gangs, he's smashed his own record.
Yes, but that's another key point. They keep saying they're going to do something about it.
Yes.
And the numbers keep going up and up and up. And they're blind to the fact that's obviously going to annoy voters. It's almost like they think voters aren't paying attention.
Look over here. Yeah, I know. This is Gertie. Good morning to you. David, the only thing that Starmer gets is those against Labour are far right. That's a great point. When he says he needs to go further and quicker, what he means by that is he needs to move quicker to complete his agenda, bring his disastrous plan into fruition a lot quicker now. Tim in Suffolk, my neck of the woods. Good morning, Tim. Excellent result for Reform, but now he has to show actions from his words. If he delivers, I think you mean Farage here, if he delivers, I see him doing better next time. Keep all those messages coming in, please. What exactly does Starmer mean when he says he gets it? 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222 as well. This is in the Express this morning. Where's that gone? In the Express. Heartbroken farmers suicidal. Now, I live in a very agricultural community. I'm surrounded by fields. It's arable farmland. And heartbroken farmers have been pushed to the brink of suicide, according to this newspaper, by Rachel Reeves' inheritance tax raid. This is according to Victoria Atkins, the Shadow Environment Secretary. Farmers say their communities face a mental health crisis. They're urging the government to do a U-turn on the planned extension of the death tax. Now, the farmers are really in trouble here. Miss Atkins said she was told by a tearful farmer, if there was a rope in the corner of this room, I would use it. So the tax changes are coming into force from April next year. So that means that agricultural assets worth more than £1 million. Let's just be very clear about that. £1 million is nothing when it comes to a farm. A combine harvester is more than £1 million. You'll be liable for a 20% tax charge. And of course, many of these farms don't make very much money at all. I was actually looking at the DEFRA figures. 30% of farms made a loss in 2023 and 2024. 25% of farms made profits under £25,000. Raj, you mentioned earlier about the governing classes living in London not actually getting out and about. Do you think they've actually been to a farm?
Probably not, but here's the other thing that I think the voters are aware of that Starmer doesn't seem to be aware they're aware of. There's an obvious contradiction in pushing a growth agenda, saying we're all for growth, and then these massive taxes, which means the farmers are basically saying, between the lines or not between the lines, there's no point doing any farming.
Well, there isn't.
So, you know, how does that promote a growth agenda?
Well, and also, the fact is they're taking any land off them anyway to stick stupid solar panels all over them. It's interesting, as I drove down the A12, I saw all of these solar panels. In fact, there's a great video by someone who I won't mention, but she walks onto a solar farm and there is the hypocrisy. All these panels made by China, wrapped in plastic, sitting in an arable field, which we're going to destroy our fertile arable land where we need food to feed the nation in a very unstable world. I mean, what kind of crackpot scheme is that?
Yeah, but again, it goes back to the point that the newspaper is making a very important point about farmers. Farmers already have, statistically speaking, a higher than average suicide rate, and that's for reasons to do with the fact that I don't want to go into gory details. They have more access to violent means of doing away with themselves, so it is actually more dangerous than even this headline writer may be aware of, in terms of that group of people feeling suicidal is more worrying than other groups of people being suicidal because of the access they have to certain means.
This is interesting, though. This comes, I was talking about China there and Chinese solar panels, which seems absolutely ridiculous to me. But anyway, Donald Trump's tariff czar has accused Britain of being a compliant servant of communist China. I think that's the front page of the, is it the Telegraph this morning? Yeah, here we are. Britain is a servant of communist China, according to the Trump aide. He says the government must resist string-laden gifts from Beijing and avoid being a dumping ground for goods that China can't sell to the US because, of course, the US has tightened up what the Chinese can import there. He says if the Chinese vampire can't suck up the American blood, it's going to suck up British blood and the EU blood. This is a very dangerous time for the world economies with respect to exposure to China. And, of course, by just ignoring the facts, Rachel Reeves and David Lammy have both made high-profile visits to China in recent months. They are calling for pragmatic re-engagement with Beijing. They are tone-deaf yet again.
Tone deaf in what sense?
Well, in every sense. They're being told China is a problem, China is a threat to Western democracies. They're saying, right, we need to cosy up to China.
But this headline's about something slightly different, isn't it? It's about the idea that the Americans are worried that, everyone, because they're pulling up the drawbridge...
Well, that is also true.
That, the rest of the world will start trading with each other because they've got no choice, because they can't trade with America. So that's what...
Is it saying that? Or is it saying that actually you're foolish?
Well, what's the Reform Party's policy on tariffs, just out of interest? Are you guys pro-tariffs?
Well, actually, no. No, absolutely not. But what we...
Just asking.
Oh, sorry. But what I'm saying is that actually it's the first Brexit dividend, which I rather like. The fact is we got lower tariffs, didn't we, than the European Union.
That's what Brexit was meant to be about.
And exactly. But actually, if we bothered to Brexit properly, which the Labour government doesn't want us to do, then we'd actually have... I reckon, actually, if we Brexited properly, we wouldn't have had any tariffs at all. But anyway...
So you're anti-tariffs, then, as a party?
Well, I want freedom of trade, yes.
Yeah, OK.
Yes.
Okay. So you're not pro the Trump view, then, of... You're not pro-tariffs in that sense?
No,
okay.
Not at all. Not at all. Now you've put me off my train of
Sorry,
thought. Where was I going next?
Question.
Yes, you asked me a question. You're not here to ask questions. Where was I going with that? Anyway,
this headline is about the idea that they're saying that we're cozying up to China.
Oh, I know what it was. Yeah. It was to say that also the British people have voted for Brexit, right? We still haven't got Brexit. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer cozying up with the European Union. What bit does he not get?
Yeah, OK, well, I agree. If you guys are anti-tariffs, I think that's a good thing, because it's better trade with the rest of the world, is the answer, I think. But the Americans are scared of the rest of the world trading with each other. That's what that headline's about, I think.
All right. I think we have to go to a break in a minute. I want to talk about Prince Harry, but I want to make sure we do it justice. Lots of messages coming in, though. Good morning, and David and Raj, great show. As a new Reform voter in Staffordshire, this is Paul. I'm excited to have Reform now leading our council. The two-party leadership system is finished. They are tone-deaf and out of touch, as we both said, of course. The proof of the pudding is now in the eating thereof. So now they have to step up to the plate and actually turn those councils round. Now, what Richard Tice has been saying, is that we need to bring in a Doge-style drive to go through, audit all of those councils. I've got a brilliant fact sheet which I printed out oh, here we are. Like, what the council waste. There's just some absolutely peachy stuff. Derbyshire County Council spent £150 million on a waste recycling plant that they can't actually get to work. That's quite a good one. Durham County Council spent £40,000 to send 4 executive staff to a property conference in the south of France. Doncaster, where one of those mayoral elections was, spent up to £20 million on cycle lanes in the last 4 years. Guess how much cycling increased by? None. So that was good, I thought. Nottinghamshire County Council spent £600,000 for pet care management service, including transport, boarding and any medical services. There are some other brilliant ones here. Lancashire County Council is spending £60 million over 5 years for agency staff neutral vendor managed service and workforce solutions. What is that?
And what all these lists are doing is the voters think it's not a Tory or a Labour problem. Both of them are at it, basically.
Yes.
Spending money needlessly.
Devon County Council spent £1.7 million on an electric vehicle for staff. They spent £15 million on... This is Devon now. £15 million on cycle lanes. How much did cycling increase by?
No idea.
None. No inclusion. This is... Where's my favourite one? Anyway, there's one that's my favourite one, where asylum seekers are being given driving lessons.
So can I ask you, these new candidates who've been elected, what's their history in politics? Because the other great exciting thing about the Reform Party for many people is the idea that you got an opportunity to enter politics.
Correct.
If you felt
the vast majority have no experience.
Yeah, which is a good thing.
I think it's a good thing because they've actually done something. Or we've got young people, we've got old people, we've got people coming out of retirement. All of that is brilliant. People who are just really passionate about turning the country around.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to get just people engaged in politics again, as opposed to turned off by it.
Yes, I would agree. Right, I've converted you. The time is
Not sure about that.
All right, okay. Time is 7:24. Do I need to go to a break now? I thought I did. Let's go to a break. After the break, I promise I will go through this morning's front pages. I keep being derailed by Dr. Raj. Good morning, this is Weekend Breakfast.
Making sure that they're in 2-star, 3-star, 4-star hotels is attracting people. We're basically creating a magnet for these illegal migrants to come here into this country.
So was that a yes? Still stick them in tents in the middle of a cold spell?
But the point
it's just inhumane. Where are you coming from? How far have we gone down the drain as a population that for the most part care?
Jim,
the most part care.
The point is, I think that many people, of course, do care, and nobody would say that children should be allowed to be in tents across the country in that way. But fundamentally, we have allowed millions of people to come into this country illegally. Many of them, some of them, a proportion of them, on small boats.
It's not
millions illegally, not millions on small boats.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Good morning, Jenny. Good morning, Jenny. Lovely to hear from you. David, yours is the only show worthwhile at weekends. That's very kind. Thank you. Overriding absolutely everything is immigration. I agree. And that's the point I made. Immigration underpins everything. If you've got an influx of millions of people into this country, then how on earth do you cope with the schools, the hospitals, GPs, the dentists, for example, the roads, the housing? Everything comes off immigration. Anyway, she goes on to say, overriding absolutely everything is immigration, the enormously high levels of which are changing this country into what we all, in capitals, all do not want. Only reform has the nous to sort it. All others' policies pale into insignificance. This is a good one. Thanks, Jenny. This one, let's start buying directly from farmers and stop buying in supermarkets. Very powerful, and actually I'm lucky enough in the country I can do that. I do go to farmers' shops and I do go to the butchers. And actually, it's brilliant. The meat is much better. Do you know, when you go to a butcher's and you buy chicken, it doesn't shrink to a tiny little thing. It's a proper chicken. Do you know what I mean? It's not pumped full of things.
But also there's a personal contact, personal service. Very important thing that we've lost, I think.
I know. I agree totally. Keep all of these messages coming in. Good morning, Dr. D. This is Ed in Thurrock. Good morning. This is a question that really bugs me. I want to find out, where do we go from here if at the next election Reform UK don't win and Starmer is allowed back in due to a split on the right? A thought that makes me sick to my stomach. What will be the plan B? I'm really worried about such a possibility. What is fascinating about this is the Tories, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, saying, well, we need to think about a coalition with Reform. My answer, no, you're not having it. No, we don't need it.
And that's a sign of confidence.
Yes, we're very confident.
And it's a sign of their lack of confidence that they're talking about.
And arrogance, that we might even consider it.
Yeah.
In 2019, we stood down.
They're at the top table, you see. That's what they think.
That's what they think. They're in the grand hall of one of those university colleges. That's what they think, yeah. Great show, David. Keir and Nigel need to fix rented housing. I agree. We need more houses to rent. Serco snapped them all up. Rents have gone from £895 to £1,200, £1,300. These are huge numbers, 1,400. Labour froze housing allowance here at 1,075. People are going to be evicted because they can't afford the rent. This is another good point. Very good. Good tenants are being 56-day evicted to get the Serco premium rent. That's appalling. By the way, you can tell I've done my facts and figures. There are 1,200 people waiting for social housing. 1.2 million people waiting for social housing. The government has committed to build 1.5 million homes over 5 years. But on top of that, you've also got all of those people coming here illegally that are going to be housed. So the numbers don't work. And so they're not building enough homes. Keep all of those coming in. Let's talk about Prince Harry now. Do we have to? Prince Harry's outburst about King Charles will only deepen the rift with Buckingham Palace and make any reconciliation an even more distant prospect. This is according to this Sunday Telegraph. Palace insiders suggested the Duke of Sussex's extraordinary comments and accusations have done nothing to build bridges. Well, there's a surprise, Harry. They added it will also cement the Palace's resolve that he cannot be trusted to keep anything private. Now, I kind of missed this because I was in the middle of the election, but he did this interview, didn't he, with a journalist, where he basically made this comment about the King's cancer, where he said, I really want to get back with my family, and of course I don't know how long my father has to live, which I thought was deeply distasteful and something you just don't say in public. Rather than me paraphrase it, though, let's have a look at the clip and see what Prince Harry managed to say.
I would love reconciliation with my family. There's no point in continuing to fight anymore. As I said, life is precious. I don't know how much longer my father has. He won't speak to me because of this security stuff. But it would be nice to reconcile.
I mean, I just don't even know where to start with that.
Well, yeah, the interview was very interesting. I saw the whole interview, and psychologically very interesting. So he says he wants to reconcile, and there's no point continuing fighting, but he's been fighting for about 5 years, fighting battle after battle to get the state to pay for his protection, okay? So he's the one doing all the fighting, and the interview was very interesting because it happened just shortly after the announcement, the court announced. So he was clearly shell-shocked. He looked like he was like kind of recovering from the thing. So it was a very emotional interview. But for him to say things like, he said, I wish someone had told me before that actually there was no chance we had of winning. Well, you sure, Harry, that your lawyers didn't tell you?
They would have told him.
And you didn't realise or were in denial. But the other thing that was really weird was he did a rough back-of-the-envelope calculation that it costs about $1 million a year, he said. He said the press said it was 20 million. He said it's about 20 times less. So
he did.
Back of the envelope, it's about $1 million. Well, he can afford $1 million himself, right?
Yes.
But he kept saying that basically the state has access to intelligence. This is what he was hinting at, that any private security wouldn't have access to that kind of intelligence. And that's why he's saying, my life's in danger. This was the theme. My life's in danger. The royal family is stopping me having proper state protection. So basically, the elephant in the room in the interview was the royal family is trying to get me killed. Okay, that's what he's kind of saying between the lines, right? Which is an extraordinary statement.
Well, and then he also brought up the parallels with his mother.
Yeah. So you do wonder whether he's sort of...
the full ticket?
Yeah. Well, you do wonder whether he's been disturbed, obviously, perhaps understandably, by what happened there. But, again, the other thing that was very strange is the elephant in the room. Why did the interviewer not say, are you really trying to say the royal family want you dead, in some sense? Wow. Because you're saying, actually, my life's in danger. They're actively preventing and intervening and preventing the state providing security that I deserve. He kept going on about public service as well.
But
a lot of people have done public service.
He also made it clear that that Ravek's decision was wrong, and when they pointed out that he could have his own security, the point that you make, he said, but they can't be armed. No, they can't, because we don't allow that, because you are a personal private citizen. And also, quite frankly, you chose to leave, so when you leave, you lose all the trappings that go with it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a huge amount of apparent denial over that point. But here's another point, right? Okay, so the state has access to special intelligence. You want the state to provide security because you believe your life's in danger.
Yes.
Why not say, listen, I'll pay for it? Let the state provide it, but I'll pay for it.
But I don't think they would be allowed to do that either.
But he could at least make the offer.
He could.
I thought it was interesting, because what it looks like is he's trying to sponge something.
But he also made some comparison with former prime ministers, saying, well, look at them, they get security. Well, yes, because they've actually contributed to the country.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, he's also got a messianic complex in some ways, I think. I mean, I'm no psychiatrist, but he thinks that everyone else is in the wrong, that he is always in the right.
Yeah, well, he also said something like the illogical argument. It's illogical, he said, the argument against providing security, given my life's obviously in danger. Then he said something like it's the most illogical argument ever. No, Harry, it's not the most illogical argument ever. It's just an argument you don't like. But the other thing is he keeps losing these battles and he can't move on.
No.
And just accept
So what's that about?
Well, he just can't accept something, which is actually probably this loss that he's having difficulty coming to terms with. He is no longer part of the royal family.
But then he
kept saying, I can never not be a part of the royal family. He kept saying, I was born into it, I'm always going to be in it. Well, maybe not quite in the way that you think, I think.
He also then said that the facts and the details I have on the royal family, I could write another book.
I know. To some extent, I thought that interview was actually a covert or not so covert message to the royal family, right? Because apparently he's not really in contact with them anymore, and he's sending a message by doing this interview, come to the table, negotiate with me, or I'll keep doing these interviews, which are deeply uncomfortable and somewhat unpleasant, which is not a very great way to reconcile, is it? That kind of emotional blackmail.
But I also think the thing is the public have just lost complete... well, they're just not interested in what he has to say. And the more he appears like that, the more unhinged he appears to be. And then he also mentioned that his wife might do some other flower arranging or something, some other ridiculous task that no one's interested in, or write a book or whatever it is.
Well, the other thing he said was it's an establishment stitch-up, right? So
yes, he did.
He's kind of saying the judges, the lawyers are all in on it, and basically I never stood a chance. Well, look, if there's an establishment stitch-up and people don't seem to mind if you get killed because your life's in danger, They don't want to provide security. Why would you want the state that you think are out to get you to provide security? I wouldn't trust them. I mean, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Yes, but he also...
It's all an establishment stitch-up. Well, then you want them to protect you from...
Because they're going to stitch you up then if you think there was already a stitch-up.
That sounds a bit crazy to me. You're not following through the logic of your own argument.
So is he crazy?
Well, I wouldn't want to comment directly, but I do think...
I'd like you to comment directly.
I know you would, but I think he is struggling, like a lot of people might be, with loss.
So clinically...
I also think, because I see a lot of uber-wealthy people, high-net-worth people, and they have great difficulty adjusting to something, because they've been pampered and looked after. Basically, I think his lawyers... he's kind of hinting, I wish someone had told me, right, before the court case, we stood no chance of winning. So he's kind of, like, angry with his lawyers. There's a subtext there. The lawyers have stitched me up. Well, mate, when you go to lawyers and you have a lot of money, of course they're going to say, I think we've got a chance. They're not going to say, keep your money. So they get exploited, because they're used to being looked after by an army of people. They don't realise you've got to stand on your own 2 feet, make your own decision about your chances in court, I think. That's something that happens with wealthy people. They become disabled by their wealth because they're not used to sort of looking after themselves and thinking for themselves. They rely on this army of people out there that they're used to constantly look after them.
If he came to see you as a patient...
Uh-oh.
Would you give him a clinical diagnosis and would you treat him?
Well, what I would say...
I know that's a very difficult question.
What I would say is that when people need to think about change, they have to be motivated to change. And what we saw in that interview was not someone motivated to change. So he repeated the same argument about 5 times in the interview, that, look, my life's in danger, it's clearly in danger, and I need to be protected. He said it about 5 times. What I would say to someone like that, if the world is not as you would like it to be, accept that point and move on. He's not moving on and trying to figure out a way of being in the world. Now, I think it was The Sun had an interesting story that a year ago he was visiting some wealthy person here in Britain, and Deliveroo turned up and they just opened the door and let the delivery in. In other words, there was very little security around him there. So he was hanging out with these wealthy friends and obviously not behaving as if he really is scared that his life's in
Well, I mean, if
danger.
I was the state and wanted to knock him off, I'd go as a Deliveroo driver, wouldn't you?
Anyway, if I was to... his own view is it's all an establishment stitch-up. They don't care if I get killed. My life's in danger. No one's looking after me. But I want the state to look after me. It doesn't quite make sense.
OK, so does he have a clinical psychiatric diagnosis?
You can't really say that just from watching the interview. But what you can say... What you can say is that he was reeling in an emotional shock. But why was he so shocked? He's lost every single battle on this one for the last 5 years or so. So why is he still shocked and disturbed and in denial?
OK, so final question. So if he continues down this line and he says he wants reconciliation with the family, can he see that the more he goes down this line, the less likely reconciliation is? Or
I don't think, from the interview, I would suggest it's difficult to see that he could see that. And there may be another book coming, I suspect, from what we saw there. Now, the other thing I've got to say about this, which is quite interesting into the psychology of stalking. So stalkers, like, pester someone, and they get, no, please leave me alone, and they keep doing it, even though they're getting this kind of leave me alone thing, which is not dissimilar to what might be happening between Harry and the royal family. But what happens is if you have no relationship with someone, but you really desperately want one, you don't mind having an irritating relationship, because it's better than no relationship at all, right? So I think that is one of the things that could be going on here. He actually doesn't mind, in a sense, being irritating, because it's a kind of relationship, because you see that with stalkers. Why don't stalkers get the message? You're being really irritating, and you're actually annoying the person you're following, because actually being annoying is still some kind of relationship, which is better than no relationship at all.
I think it's all desperately sad. Ed in Salisbury says, ha, 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 David, that was brilliant. Your face said it all after the clip of Harry. Like, complete despair, really. Couldn't agree more. Good morning, David and Raj. I love you two. You start my day brilliantly. That's very kind. This is... who's this? Oh, it doesn't say. Oh, it's Hev in Reformland in Kent. You start my day brilliantly.
Everywhere's Reformland.
Well, that's very true. Well done, on brand, on message. I think Prince Harry and Starmer think the same way. They want everything their way. Everyone else can do one. The arrogance is absolutely incredible. Oh, guess what? We still haven't done the front pages. Let's do those after this break. about? We're still talking about Prince Harry. Can you believe it? I won't repeat what you just said. Lots of messages, guys. Like, you're like Muttley in, what was that cartoon? Anyway, you know, the chuckling... Who was Muttley? Why was that? Dick Dastardly. Yeah, yeah. Reform take Dartford, which is fantastic. This is Vincent. Good morning. Reform took Dartford, which is fantastic. So now it's time to take a real hard look at the books to see where the money is going. Yeah, you might have driving lessons for asylum seekers in there, or you might have cycle lanes that no one cycles on. Good morning, David and Raj. Lots of these coming in. Harry has 3 issues that are problematic in his life. This is Debs. Good morning to you. His mouth.
His second favourite organ.
Right. Yeah, his second favourite. He doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut. He blames everyone else for his situation, never himself. His wife, I'm with you. It's her. It's her. His wife, she has ruined the life of what was once a greatly loved and respected royal prince.
Yeah, well, the question is, a lot of people think that she's manipulated him. Around her little finger. One of the questions that I want to ask is, are men more easily manipulable than women? I don't know.
Yes.
OK, right. I'm glad we got that one sorted. I won't ask you why.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Oh, here's a good one. Talking about waste, West Oxfordshire, this is Sandra, good morning. West Oxfordshire have built a park and ride, cost millions, never been used, as the entrance isn't suitable for buses. They can't get through the entrance. Yes, it's that kind of stuff. Keep all the... If you've got a really good example of waste in local government, please let me know, because I'm really keen.
We'll be here for months.
We will be here for months. Oh, where's my little list? I'll keep my list going.
Someone hide the list.
Someone hide the list, yes. Keep all those messages coming in. Now, I want to talk about legal immigration because it is something that drives me absolutely insane. And many of you, and I've been around the country a great deal talking to voters of all descriptions, and the overriding theme that comes out is this country is unrecognisable in terms of the illegal immigrants that are hanging around in the centre of our towns and cities who are up to no good at all. And we've seen county lines gangs, we've seen drug dealing, open drug dealing. I was with Richard Tice in Boston and Skegness, and my eyes nearly fell out on stalks. Now, this is interesting. This is a story in the Daily Mail. The country that cut asylum claims by 90% has done one thing to do that. So the sheer numbers of people coming in to this country illegally, and at the moment what we see is young men, particularly young men of economic working age. They're not asylum seekers in the true sense of the word. They're coming here. So 11,000 so far. That's 40,000 up compared with the same period last year. Keir Starmer doesn't seem to have a clue what to do. 38,000 asylum seekers in hotels at a cost of 5.5 million every single day. My understanding is there are 31,000 still in dispersal accommodation as well. At the same time, 1.3 million people, British-born people, on social housing waiting lists as well. And so there are lots of questions about what we should do. Now, my personal feeling is that if you come here illegally, you should be deported. End of story. Just deported. And that is also party policy of a particular party, by the way, Raj. But anyway, this country has cut asylum claims by 90% by banning the burqa and refusing benefits to migrants who don't learn the language. This is Denmark. So the left-leaning government came to power in 2019, promised to curb migration to protect Danishness. The country famously banned the burqa, the garment covering the face and body, worn by devout Islamic women who'd been brought to the country by their husbands. Then new rules were also introduced to compel all newcomers and their children to learn Danish, or you lose all your benefits. Now, according to the copy here, it says now the area is 99% safer. The country is considered a model for successful control of immigration. I don't know if you're going to answer this. Should we ban the burqa?
I think it's a really interesting idea, which is saying that if you're going to come here, you're going to have to cross certain hurdles before we'll accept you. So I like the idea of putting some hurdles up.
So do I.
And I think
I thought you were going to say no.
And I thought, well, the fine detail is different, but I like the idea of saying that if you're going to come here and integrate and be part of our culture, there's certain things we find acceptable, there's certain things we don't find acceptable. But learning the language, I think, is a great idea, for example. I mean,
I'm not being funny. In East London, and I'm becoming, because I'm now a really old, middle-aged, angry man most of the time, I see women dressed top to toe where they're covered in a bed sheet. It's not acceptable in Britain, is it?
Well, I'm not a big fan of it. I agree. I mean, a lot of people would say it's a form of abuse to some extent.
Well, it is.
And so, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it.
But also, I really struggle with this. And actually, if you want to live in this great country, then you have to abide by the rules of this country. And that includes taking that burqa off and actually learning English.
But the Danish are saying, if you're going to come here are the rules.
Yes.
You have to follow the rules. And then you can come. That's what they're saying.
I'd love to know what you think this morning. I think I know what the answer is going to be. Should we ban the burqa in this country?
But I'd like some British people to be able to speak English as well.
Well, I would agree with that, but also... I agree with that. But also, it goes back to the thing about British expats living in Spain ought to learn Spanish.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Shouldn't they?
Yeah. I think that's slightly different.
It is slightly different.
Usually those people have jobs and stuff. Right?
Well,
that is jobs.
That is
They're
true.
retiring there.
And also, I think what people are saying, and underpinning all of this, is the fact that many people that I speak to around the country say they don't recognise the country. It's the pace of change in the country that people are objecting to. So let me know your thoughts on that, please. That might be quite inflammatory.
They feel foreigners
in their own country,
yeah,
Raj.
They feel strangers in a strange land.
Yes, they do. So let me know your thoughts, please. That's quite interesting, actually. If Reform becomes the next government, should they ban the burqa? 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at a national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message on us on X as well at talkTV. Should we ban the burqa? Should that be policy? Let me know your thoughts. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Lost his legal challenge over the level of security he receives while in the UK. We can cross now to the Court of Appeal there and speak to Julia Atherley, Home Affairs correspondent at The Sun, who's been following this ruling. Julia, good afternoon to you. Tell us what's been happening.
Yeah, so do you remember Prince Harry made the decision in February 2020 to step back as a working royal? Initially they moved to Canada, obviously now they're in California. At that point his security was downgraded, so he doesn't get the full-time security that he would get if he was a full-time working royal, the same as his brother Prince William or indeed the King. Prince Harry then challenged that decision. So in effect now, his security is decided on a case-by-case basis when he's now in the UK, because obviously he's mainly now living in California. So Harry challenged that decision, made a judicial review, which was then rejected. He then appealed against that decision. It's now come to the Court of Appeal. Last month, Prince Harry was here for 2 days for the hearing. He was here in person.
Back. I was asking just before the break, should we ban the burqa in this country? Lots of you getting in touch about this. Kim in Belfast. Good morning, David. Yes, the burqa should be banned. This one, no name, from H. Yes, David, ban the burqa. Ban halal meat as well. Let me know your thoughts. Now, have you had a considered decision on this, Dr. Moran?
Well, I want to negotiate with you, because politics is about negotiation over the ban the burqa idea that you seem very keen on.
I'm very keen.
Having arrived at it a couple of seconds ago. I think we should ban certain shirts, maybe.
What, like
I think,
my tight one?
Maybe, possibly. I think there should be a minimum size. Or the other thing is, if you're going to wear women wear the burqa, maybe men should have to wear it as well, so they get to see what it's like. Maybe
no burqas.
Or maybe we should both do the show wearing burqas and see what it, how it how it feels.
Well, I imagine we'll have a viewing audience of 0 if we do that. OK, I'm not sure you should be in power, Dr. Raj. Let's talk about something that you do know something about.
Oh, really? OK.
Yeah, assisted dying.
OK.
This is a really serious article in The Telegraph saying more than 4,500 people a year are expected to end their lives by assisted dying within a decade of the service being legalised. This is the government document which was published on Friday. It's the first time that Whitehall has attached a financial figure to assisted dying. Now, the government says it would see up to 12 people a day ending their lives through assisted dying. Campaigners are saying the true death toll may be far higher. Now, I don't see a problem with that because I'm in favour of this as long as there are checks and balances on it. Now, you've got people like Liz Carr, who's the disabled actor who was in Silent Witness. She says the law is dangerous. What
the
is
new
it?
law? You mean the new law?
This new law would be dangerous.
Yeah.
The analysis found, and I think this is where it starts getting a bit slippery, the analysis found that 59.6 million could be saved by the NHS in 10 years. So they're now equating how much money you save if people take their own lives instead of giving palliative end-of-life care, for example. They also project savings of 6.2 million in attendance allowance, millions in unspent PIP payments, and so on. Tammy Gray-Thompson also says the report shows that assisted dying would put disabled and vulnerable people at grave risk. Now, I would counter that and say, what about those people who actually do want to end their own lives, where you have got stage 4 cancer, where you know that you're dying, that you don't want to be in pain, that you want to be in control of your death, as opposed to dying sort of a miserable, painful death?
I agree. I think there's something cruel about keeping people alive who are suffering hugely and don't want to be kept alive. And I think medicine's ability to make life acceptable in very difficult circumstances, like terminal cancer and so on, is very limited. So I think it's cruel. But what I'm worried about is if it's sort of becoming about the money now, as opposed to morality or what's helpful in terms of easing suffering, then that's obviously worrying, because it shouldn't be about the money. But I also think there's going to be so much bureaucracy around it, it's going to become unworkable. Because the NHS has already fallen over. People keep saying it's at a tipping point. It fell over, in my opinion, a long time ago.
Yeah, it's lying on the ground.
Yeah. And I think that they're going to put so much more bureaucracy on it that doctors' workload's going to go up. So assisted dying becomes an option that's not going to be workable because of the bureaucracy that's going to be around.
So my understanding is it's coming back on May the 16th to be debated again. Do you remember the bill got tweaked? So originally they had to have 2 independent doctors to determine whether the patient needs the criteria. It had to then go to a High Court judge. They then suddenly realised, actually, we haven't got enough High Court judges and it wouldn't work. So they've replaced that with a panel of experts. Well, they call them experts. Psychiatrists, lawyers...
Easy, Tiger.
Lawyers and social workers.
Yeah. Well, they start off with 2 doctors, but I bet in the end, with all this physician-associate stuff that's going on, there won't be 2 doctors at the end of it. That's the other problem. And the other thing is, where they're going to find these doctors? Because they're kind of like too busy at the moment. And they're going to have to pay them, perhaps, from a separate budget.
They will have to pay them.
And so, again, I'm not sure it's been thought through very carefully. But I agree with you that we've got to do something about assisted dying. There actually is a sense in which all dying in the Western world is a form of assisted dying. It's just a milder end of it, I think.
Well, it's also the public don't see what goes on.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Just very quickly, if I may, there's another headline. Patients, NHS may offer weight loss jabs over the counter at pharmacies. Of course, we've spoken a lot about Ozempic and Mounjaro and all the rest of it. So they're basically saying, at the moment, there's a 2-year waiting list for Wegovy on the NHS. Thousands of people can't get it. Now, obviously, obesity, a major problem in terms of healthcare economics, and we know the reasons for that. Of course, it gives you ischemic heart disease, shortness of breath, varicose veins, diabetes, osteoarthritis, you name it, you get it. Should we give weight loss jabs over the counter, or should we actually say to people, stop eating?
Well, the weight loss jab helps people stop eating. It takes away appetite.
Has side effects.
Yes, very. People don't realise that. But the other interesting thing is the criteria by which you will give people, because obviously people with a normal body mass index, you're going to say, no, you can't have the jab, because something else is going on there. You're just trying to look super fit. But the morbidly obese, people who've got a body mass index like, 35 or something, up 25 is up to the normal range. range, they're not going to want the jab because many of them are not motivated to do anything about it. But the people at the marginal end, 26 or 27 body mass index, who might benefit enormously from it, may be precluded because they'll say your body mass index is not high enough. So there's something around that, I think, that's quite interesting.
Well, the NICE is saying there could be 3.4 million people in England could benefit from the injections.
But if the injection kick-starts you so that you lose some weight and then you stop having the injection because you're now more motivated...
And then you get positive reinforcement because you can say, oh, look at me, don't I look great? Then I'm in favour. OK, so would you have...
But that kind of nuanced subtlety seems to elude people. So allow people to get going on the weight loss by starting off with it, but then stop it after a while.
So does that mean that actually you allow it for an initial period and then you have to prove that actually you, the punter, has followed up?
Yeah, I agree, Also demonstrate that you're doing something else about... Because, you know, weight is not the key thing. I mean, fitness in general is a separate thing. Be more physically active. So if it helps them embrace...
Go and knock on doors in a political campaign. That makes you fit.
Yes. If it helps you embrace a more active lifestyle, then that's helpful. Again, it's about a deeper point that the Reform Party hopefully might address about personal responsibility. People want a magic bullet answer to problems in their lives, as opposed to doing the work to get better, which is a better answer.
Just very quickly, some messages. Good morning, David and Raj. The pace of demographic change in this country is unbelievable. I'm born and bred in Luton. The town is unrecognisable from 20 years ago. It's a ghastly place now. My grandparents were also born and bred Lutonians. My nan said to me 35 years ago this would happen, and she was dead right. She would be ashamed of the state of the country as it now is. Keep these men. That's Paul in Hitchin. Thank you very much for that, Paul. Good morning, David. There are 18 Muslim countries that ban the burqa, some of them Muslim countries. So why is it a problem to do the same thing in an officially Christian country? That's a great point, great point. Except fear of being called racist, which is... our viewers never, ever tell untruths. The burqa needs banning, says Jeff in Aberdeenshire, because men can wear it to disguise what they're up to. As well, it's just plain downright wrong. Yeah, David, ban the burqa, learn the language. If you can't speak English, you should pay for an interpreter. Like in Spain, if you can't speak Spanish and say you have to go to the hospital, you'll have to pay for an interpreter yourself. That would save a fortune for the NHS alone. And
ban the burqa, learn the language. Great motto.
Right, that's my policy. Raj, thanks ever so much for coming in this morning. Brilliant. I'm sure you're off to play tennis or something.
Obviously, definitely.
Obviously. Don't worry, we'll continue with the programming after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
morning to you, just after 8 o'clock on Sunday, May the 4th. I have returned for Star Wars Day, yes, indeed, after quite a thrilling political battle, as I think you know, and the results were quite phenomenal. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. Great news, though, this hour. It's International Organ Day today. That's right. It's a day that promotes appreciation for the vast grandeur of an instrument that breathes life into vast spaces, creating intricate melodies with majestic resonance. Of course, those pictures brought to you by my local church, actually. St Michael's Framlingham with a Tamar organ. How many left? 3 in the country, actually. A great piece of music as well, Phantom the Opera as well. Also, it's Worldwide Firefighters Day today, a day that celebrates those courageous men and women who put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe.
Pew, pew, Barney McGrew, Cuthbert, Dibble, Grub.
Was that Trumpton or Camberwick Green? Oh, it was Trumpton. And also, it's May the 4th. That means it's Star Wars Day. Yes, May the 4th be with you.
Today's fascinating facts.
Ooh, some new ones for you. On this day in 1923, the birth of Eric Sykes, radio, television and film writer, actor and director, whose performing career spanned more than 50 years. He frequently wrote for and or performed with Tony Hancock, with Spike Milligan, and with the legend himself, Peter Sellers. Wait for this. On this day in 1966, Harold Wilson's government agreed to increase doctors' and dentists' salaries by up to 30% after fears that thousands of GPs would leave the health service for a private practice. How history repeats itself. And on this day in 1979, do you know what happened on this day in 1979? Well, the answer is the Conservative Party won the general election, making Margaret Thatcher Britain's first woman Prime Minister. And that happened on this day in 1979, and those are this hour's fascinating facts.
David Bull's breakfast, oh what a treat. Gather around, it can't be beat. Wake up your senses, let's celebrate. Lives flowing, it's never too late.
Well, good morning to you, just after 8 o'clock already on May the 4th. I have returned from the local mayoral and the Runcorn by-election, and let me just tell you, wow, what a few days that was. But some very interesting results, which we'll talk about in a moment. Reform UK front page of the Sunday Times. It fascinates me because back in the day, what, 3-4 years ago, I was sitting in my kitchen with Richard Tice, and we were talking about the fact that people didn't know the name Reform, and we talked about how we would actually have dual branding of Reform, and whether we call it Reform UK, should it actually be Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party. We had all of these conversations. Well, they know who Reform UK is now, don't they? Reform, this is the front page of the Sunday Times. Young need a moral re-education. This is Zia Youssef, who is the chairman of the party. Reform is going to begin a campaign to remoralise young people, according to this, and declare a national emergency on illegal migration. That is what everyone was saying on the doorstep. So regardless whether they were local issues or national issues, the whole thing comes down to just the sheer numbers of people coming into this country. 7 million people over the last 10 years. 11,000 illegal migrants this year alone, up 40% on where we were last year. So he also goes to talk about the government, if Reform was to get in, would be more transformational than Margaret Thatcher's. He says that actually what we need to do is we need to have 20% tax relief on school fees, which flies in the face of the ideological imposition of VAT by the Labour government on private school fees. A patriotic curriculum, a ban on transgender ideology in the classroom. Well said. 2-year degrees and a doubling of the number of pupil referral units so schools can work safely. Also, cut out net zero nonsense and madness and green initiatives and end working from home. That's the front page of that one. The Observer has a blooming Reform on the front page. So a picture of lots of activists and lots of people work very hard across the country. We've also got the Sunday Telegraph, Kemi Badenoch's response to what is going on. We will not chase Farage to the right. Kemi, you don't know what you're going to do next, do you? And then we've been talking about this, the Mail talking about Prince Harry again, this awful interview he gave where he actually said, I don't know how long the king has got left to live. I'd love a reconciliation. It's all about Harry every single time. He cannot see that he is actually the problem here. Excuse me. The Sunday Express, heartbroken farmers are suicidal. Again, this is the government completely out of touch with what is going on in our local rural communities. And the fact is that farmers actually don't make a great deal of money. Excuse me. And also VE Day tomorrow. Sunday Mirror, honour our lion-hearted heroes. That is the Prime Minister there. Well, let's move on and just do some messages very quickly. David, it's great for reform, but now they have to prove to the country they can be worthy of government, excuse me, by doing what they can. They said they'll do. No rowing back, no watering down like other parties. Well done. That's Terry in Birmingham. Stuart says, David Keir is well aware of actions that will reduce immigrants, but has decided he doesn't want to until Keir has the will to stop the migrants. The conveyor belt of illegals arriving will continue and increase. Keep those messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, Keir Starmer says, look, I get it, because the results were absolutely diabolical for Labour. They were absolutely hideous for the Tories. But Keir Starmer says, I get it. What exactly do you get, Keir Starmer? Because you say you're going to carry on and press ahead with your plan for change. So you get it, but as Raj says, you're going to press the accelerator to have more of it, which is exactly what you've been told by the public they don't want. What does he get? 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Keep those messages coming in, please. But now we'll talk more about the elections. Joining me down the line, I've got Charlie Rowley, who is a former Conservative advisor, and also James Matthewson, former Labour advisor. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Right, let's start. Nigel Farage has declared the end of two-party politics after Reform UK secured the greatest ever local election results for an outsider party. He said Reform had had the Labour Party for lunch. He said that Reform UK had wiped out the Conservatives in parts of England. Reform UK took control of 10 local councils, winning hundreds of seats across areas from Durham to Kent, toppling a 15,000 Labour majority in Runcorn and Helsby. Reform won 10 councils, mayoral elections in Greater Lincolnshire, Hull and East Yorkshire. If you look here, what's crucial is the percentage national share. The percentage national share was 30, and the reason that's important is because you can then extrapolate it. That gives Reform 420 parliamentary seats, putting them well over the 326 needed for a majority. Labour would shrink to 138 seats. Conservatives might as well be actually just working in the kitchens in Parliament, and the Lib Dems on 17. Let's start, if we can, with you, Charlie. The Conservative Party are toast.
Well, it was a terrible night for the Tories. There's no getting away from it. It was a terrible night for Labour. There's no getting away from that either.
I think we've lost your connection, Charlie, actually. James, I'll come to you if I may. It was disastrous for Labour. I was sitting in the election studio at New Broadcasting House with cabinet ministers who didn't know what to say as the numbers came in. I was watching the tally of councillors coming in, the councils changing. All they kept saying was the same platitudes: working people, fixing the foundations, plan for change. It's just a load of word salad. Labour is not listening to what the public is saying.
Well, yeah, it was an absolutely dreadful night, wasn't it? Across the board for the main parties that have existed for some time now, and I think that's why Reform have been benefited from this, is because there is this anti-establishment kind of energy behind Reform that exists. Now it doesn't anymore, I'm afraid. now that they're going to run authorities, and now that they actually have power. Well, you can't be anti-establishment and be the establishment. That's the thing. So, of course, that energy, that benefit that they get of being the outsider comes to an end with every council that they run now. They've got responsibility and they've got also an opportunity and a chance, I admit that, to show people what they can do. But without the well-oiled machinery that has existed in the Conservative Party for hundreds and hundreds of years and in the Labour Party for over 100 years, you haven't got that benefit of being able to kind of manage that message to service all of those councillors. Up until now, Reform has existed really has been beneficial as a platform for the likes of Nigel Farage to get up and do press conferences whenever he wants, all this stuff. But that party now has to operate as a political party does and service all of these councillors at a level of local democracy. So it's going to be difficult for them and it's not going to be easy.
So Sir John Curtis, Britain's foremost polling expert, said Reform surge is unprecedented, said no party has ever beaten both Labour and Tories in council seats and votes in a set of elections. I just want to pick you up on something you said to me last time. You said you talk about the working class communities. You don't know working class communities. Well, I would suggest I do, and I got it right. They voted for Reform UK.
Now, listen, David, I will caution you here, as I've cautioned Labour politicians who I've worked for in the past. Don't get too drunk on your own success, all right? You don't know the exact reason that every single person
I do know the exact reason. They're sick and tired of it. No, wait, they are sick and tired of the Labour government being woefully out of touch. As I said on the night of the election, people are hurting. Energy bills are too high. They feel the government is just sitting there, not listening to what they need. Energy costs are too high, the cost of living is too high, and the government is totally tone deaf.
Yeah, they've pressed the change button. Right, that's what I believe's happened. It seems you agree with that in some regard, that they're sick of the current status quo and that they want change. The things aren't good enough for people as they are right now and as they stand. And I don't think they have been for some time through successive different governments. And they pressed the change button at the general election for Labour in the opposite direction to the Tories, and they've ended up with much of the same as the Tories. It's just a continuation of the status quo. So, of course, they're looking to shake things up. If you're looking to try and go in a different direction at all, there's only one political party at the moment, really, who are offering that, and that's Reform. Now, that's as far as I'll go in my generosity to Reform. I understand they represent change and they represent anti-establishment vote. However, the things that they stand for, I do not believe are in step with those working class communities.
What like? Looking after your family? Looking after your community? Looking after your country? You don't like that?
Some of the things you've just talked about there, David, they're values that we can all get behind. They're values every single political party.
But they didn't get behind Labour, did they?
No, they're values that every single political party will say that they represent. In reality.
So why did they trust Reform?
No. Talk to me about transgender ideology, because you just mentioned that before we came on.
Well, it's a nonsense. We've had a Supreme High Court ruling on it, and now it has been put to bed.
What is transgender ideology? Explain it to me.
What has this got to do with anything?
Well, it's the fact that it takes prominence in the Reform message. They've got an issue with the pride flag being flown places.
No, they don't. You are talking utter nonsense. Let's go to... James, I can't listen to any more hogwash. I'm going to bring in Charlie Rowley now. Charlie, the Conservative Party got an absolute battering, lost all of the council seats, all of the councils that it had control of before the election. Kemi Badenoch has issued an apology. Fine. She has no idea how to go, where she goes from here, how she regroups. And the front page, I think, of the Telegraph this morning just says, we won't outflank Farage on the right. To me, this shows a woeful understanding of what's going on, because the voters who came to Reform aren't right-wingers. These are people who have come from tribally Labour parties. We saw huge votes coming from the industrial heartlands in the north that believe they've been completely let down by successive administrations. But we also have seen Reform votes coming from the Shires, from Middle England as well. Something dramatic has happened here in the political landscape.
It has. And just that little conversation there highlights why people from both the Labour Party and the Tory Party are fed up with the status quo and have driven to Reform because it positions itself as the party of common sense. People didn't vote for the Labour Party at the general election because they wanted change for Labour. They voted for the Labour Party as they saw it as the alternative because they were fed up with the Tory party chopping and changing its leader, the internal politics, the lack of getting on top of issues that people cared about, like dealing with immigration, etc., etc. They wanted lower taxes. They just wanted rid. This Labour government have not been a continuation of the Tories. Dare I say it, they've been even worse. They've taken away the winter fuel allowance, they've taxed farmers, and they've not even been able to define, apologies I missed, or I'm not sorry I missed, that previous conversation about transgender ideology. I don't think I missed much, because you've had a Prime Minister of this country that doesn't even know or hadn't known what a woman is. And if you're still obsessed about that kind of debate, you are missing the point. The great British people of this country want this government, or want their government, to deal with the cost of living, getting the economy back on track, making sure that their kid, their boy or girl, can go to a good or outstanding school. They want to make sure that they can have the NHS that's there for them, that's not abused, that's a national health service, not an international health service. They want to make sure that when they get up in the morning, if they go to work, if they play by the rules, if they do the right thing, that the economy is going to reward them. If you're getting involved still in this conversation about attacking minorities, which is not the case, and the Supreme Court was very clear about those that identify as transgender, but it was making it absolutely clear that you can have, in sports in particular, people that identify as female but are born men. You cannot compete. Bringing this country back to a common sense approach, most people welcome that. If you're in the Labour Party still obsessing about that, then I'm afraid that's the reason why you've seen Reform do so well. And if you don't get that, you're only going to see Reform do well in the future.
James?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid there's only one person obsessing about it, and that's the person who mentioned transgender ideology in the classroom, which was David.
No, you mentioned it. You mentioned it.
I mentioned it. Reform were the only political...
What are you talking... James, what are you talking about?
David, you're talking over me. Let me finish. Reform were the only political party to mention transgender ideology in their manifesto.
But, James, let me just pause you. That we had a ruling before the election. So Reform was right. The court came down on the side of Reform and its policy. But that is not what... But that is not... It did.
Down on the side of anyone.
It did. It said... But, listen, I don't want to go down a debate about trans because it's been settled by the courts.
You're absolutely right. And Charlie's right. We shouldn't just focus on that issue.
Let me ask you this question then. Keir Starmer got an absolute thumping, and yet he's put cheese in his ears. He says, I get it, and then presses the accelerator saying that's why we need to accelerate our plan for change. He is delusional.
I mean, they haven't changed hardly anything. That's the problem.
That's right.
If you ask people what Labour stands for and what it represents currently, they haven't got a clue. They don't know. They're directionless, and it's the same with the Tories. And because of that, you've got them wandering around all trying to work out what they stand for and what they represent. And because of that, you've got Reform coming up the middle, taking votes off both of them. If you dominate your own side of politics, take care of your side of the street. The Labour Party is a centre-left party. I don't ever think that Charlie will vote Labour. I don't ever expect you to ever vote Labour, David. But I want the people who want a progressive political party. And we talk about, the biggest kind of phrase that grinds my gears at the moment in politics is common sense. Because that makes no sense. It's an empty phrase. Common sense is just what everybody thinks their own opinion is.
That's not true.
To me, common sense is very different to your common sense. So actually, it doesn't mean anything in a measurable sense of the word.
Hang on a minute. That's absolute claptrap. Common sense is putting British interests first. It's actually making sure that we help... Hang on a minute. It's about helping people with the cost of living. It's making sure that we feel secure on the streets. It's making sure our children are safe in schools. It's making sure that we achieve the best for the best and the brightest. We try and do everything by meritocracy in this country. I don't think any of that is not common sense.
No, all of that is what everybody agrees on, but that's not...
But they don't, do they?
No, but that's not politics. Politics isn't the outside of the box, it's the inside. It's how you do that. Me and the Tories, look, I could sit down with Charlie all day long. We can agree on the principles of what we want to see and achieve. Me and Charlie probably got into politics for exactly the same reason. However, how we do that, that's politics.
Let me ask Charlie then. Charlie, Keir Starmer, I am absolutely gobsmacked that Keir Starmer says he gets it, and then clearly then enacts more of the same, proving he doesn't get it.
Well, I agree with James to a certain extent that I think everybody, 99% of people, do want the same thing, but it is how you achieve that. But I do think if you ask probably 99% of people in the Labour Party, would you take away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners? They'd say no. Do you think it's fair if you're that coalition that voted Tory in 2019 for Boris Johnson in the Red Hall, who voted for Brexit? Do you think it's fair that people that come into this country legally should get priority over housing? Or should all of a sudden get some sort of deal with landlords, that they get a 5-year tenancy? Most people would say, duh, no. That's common sense, but that is something that the Labour Party are completely, the current government, I should say, the Labour government, not everyone in the Labour Party, but the current government are completely rudderless of. It's that common sense that you talked about, David. It's about fairness. It's about putting the British people first. It's about making sure that actually, the choice between having energy bills higher because of a drive to net zero versus lower energy bills, all the while trying to maintain a cleaner, greener environment, it's a no-brainer. Why on earth Ed Miliband, I was trying to think of something else to call him then, is determined. The fact that Tony Blair, former Labour Prime Minister, had to intervene only last week to say this is nuts because it's costing the taxpayer. And I don't think that was an untimely intervention the day before the local elections. He knew exactly what he's doing because, you know what, whether you like Tony Blair or not, he's a politician, he's a political operator, he gets politics. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but he knows how to play politics. Whereas Keir Starmer knows clearly zero about it and had the audacity to turn up at a defence plant in Bedfordshire the day after the local elections and not mention the loss of Runcorn, not mention the loss of what was to be for Labour Party councillors or Labour councillors up and down the country, because he doesn't get the politics. So I agree most people want the same thing, but what has happened is that the Tories have failed after chopping and changing their leader so often and not addressing the issues that most people want. This Labour government clearly don't have a clue. So people are turning to reform, but they're not just turning to reform because they're there. They're turning to reform because what Nigel Farage is saying is the right thing. It is about common sense, but it's about returning pride, dignity to the British people. It's about returning back to common sense values, about looking after the majority of people. It's
common sense. You can't just say common sense to mean your own view and opinion.
But James, let me
tell you.
Hang on, chaps. I don't want an ethereal conversation, but Charlie is saying the reason, so if I'm paraphrasing what Charlie said, he's saying it's not a protest vote going to reform, that reform is saying, listening to the electorate, and is saying exactly what the electorate want, which is if you come here illegally, you will be deported. We will look after British people first. We will ensure they get on the housing ladder. We will get cheap energy bills. We're going to stop the madness of net zero. We're going to stop these bonkers green policies. And James, that is what people voted for.
No, I'm afraid I think you're wrong. I think you're both wrong on that. It's not the case. I think people are falling, drinking the Kool-Aid when it comes to this idea that all the working class communities are the same and that everybody in them wanted exactly that outcome, wanted exactly those policies, wanted to hear them. They are so frustrated. And this was, and God love me, I don't want to revisit Brexit, for the love of God, but at the same time, this was the same thing that we saw on the ground. And those of us who were, I was trying to get the Remain vote out in parts of England where other people weren't even paying any attention. I knew that it was going to go, to a leave. Other people ignored that. But the same thing is happening now. They are ignoring those communities, and because they've ignored those communities, The only other option available at the moment is reform. But don't take that to mean that your idea of a patriotic curriculum, whatever the hell that means, because nobody knows what it means, the idea of attacking transgender ideology, the idea of attacking...
You're obsessed with trans. What is the obsession?
The only person who's mentioned it. Before we came on air, you said that transgender ideology in the classroom was one of the main issues.
I did not say that. But you are obsessed. You are obsessed. This is, I think, what Charlie's... Hang on a minute, James. The point that Charlie made was the disconnect between central Islingtonian Labour government and their obsessions... James, be quiet. Their obsessions with these minority subjects, whereas they are ignoring what everyone is telling me on the streets. They are hurting. They can't afford to put food on the table. They are being made to have heat pumps.
We know that firsthand, some of us, right? People like you and the millionaires in the Reform Party do not know that.
Where did you get... James, you are... Cut James off. I'm sorry, James. I'm not having that. That is not acceptable.
Made up of the most powerful and rich among us, all right? Your MPs...
Say that again. Say that again.
Your MPs, as it stands, are millionaires. You've got people there, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice...
Andrew Jenkins as our mayoral candidate who looks after a special educational needs child. We've got Sarah Pochen. She's not a millionaire.
Those communities, I'm talking about how your party is run and how it's been run.
You know nothing about it.
All right? And what you're talking about, when it comes, we'll see this come at the crunch when you have to run authorities. You have to make real decisions. And this is going to be a real problem for you. But what I'm talking about is the fact that you would rather, because you talk about obsessions with minorities, there is only one political party in the country that is talking about transgender ideology and trying to blame minorities for our problems, right? The majority of people in working class communities aren't on board with that message. They're not.
James, I'm going to read you a message here. Tim, James is talking rubbish. What's on the inside is the core. The core affects the outside. It's common sense. We want no immigration, net zero, 1.5 million houses, only 10% to be social housing. The core is incorrect. So essentially, I'm aghast at James Matthewson, particularly when he claims Labour hasn't done anything yet, increasing NI, the economy crashes, winter fuel allowance, farmers' land, removing the only deterrent for illegals, net zero, increasing council tax when Keir Starmer said he wouldn't. The issue behind Labour here, and sorry, Charlie, I need to get you in here, but isn't the issue here for Labour, Charlie, that Labour blatantly lied?
Well, yes. I mean, for want of a better word, absolutely. I mean, my question would be, and my thought is, and again, being sort of generous, look, you know, even in the run-up to the general election, I mean, people, again, will have a view about Tony Blair. But even in the run-up to the general election, Tony Blair said the Labour Party shouldn't get itself tied up in knots about gender ideology, about all of that, because it's affecting a minority. It needs to focus on the bread and butter politics. So my question, or my thought is, look, even though it was a terrible night for the Conservatives, they lost every council that they were controlling. They lost hundreds of councillors. It's bad news for the Tories. They've got a long way to come back from. But if you look in Runcorn, that was a 40... Look, I know what it's like to lose a 14,000 majority, 16,000 majority seat, to the Lib Dems under Boris's time when there were by-elections in North Shropshire and the like. Labour have just lost a 15,000 majority seat in Runcorn. They have lost Durham County Council, not just by a handful of Reform councillors, by a cataclysmic transition of councillors that have come in. They slipped through the middle when it came to the west of England. They pipped Reform to the post in North Tyneside, in Doncaster, because arguably you could say that the right vote was split between Reform and the Tories. If it wasn't for those Tory candidates, or if it wasn't for both of those parties standing, Reform would have had an absolute clean sweep. So that's my question to anybody in the Labour Party that might still not want to change course, or might think that actually everything's going fine, we just need to double down, we need to get through the hard times. You've got to sit down and ask yourself, why are so many people, not just in the South, because a lot of the Tory seats were lost to the Lib Dems and Reform, but Reform were winning greatly in the North. So if you're a Labour Party member, and this is what I just would be keen to do from James, politely ask, what is it that Labour think that they're still doing that's so great? Or why can't you recognise that Reform have done so well, not on the back of Tory failure, but it's on the back of Labour failure now? And can you not understand why Reform are doing so well? Because they are talking the talk, they are talking about the issues that the general public, the great British public, really care about, and the Labour Party and the Conservatives previously have been totally absent about those conversations. They've been nowhere near speaking the language of the British people, and that's why Reform are doing so well.
Let me pause it there. I need to go to a break. We'll continue this conversation after the break with Charlie Rowley and James Mathewson. Don't go anywhere.
we're coming to the, I think we're coming to the end of an era. We're coming to the end of this progressive era, that the so-called progressive era, that the Conservative Party could do nothing about. They couldn't handle it. They didn't know. They didn't have an ethos. They didn't have a philosophy. And now it's time for a kind of conservative revolution, I suppose, and Reform are the party to produce that conservative revolution.
Are we at the end of the progressive era, Benjamin?
I actually think we're at the end of the Thatcherite consensus, to be honest, because ever since the 80s, the argument has been it doesn't matter where it's produced.
About 8:35, we're in a very heated discussion with Charlie Rowley and James Mathewson. So many messages coming in. I failed to mention this earlier. Of course, James Mathewson accused everyone in Reform UK of being a millionaire, or at least those in charge of being a millionaire. I can assure you, James, I am not a millionaire. Also, by the way, it is worth pointing out the leader of the Labour Party is a millionaire, as are lots of people in the so-called Working People's Party. Lots of you saying, tell James Starmer is a millionaire. James hasn't got a clue. This is why Labour was lost. James is so wrong. This is Cheryl. And just wow. And let's bring the chaps back now. Paul Burnett wants to say something to... This is Paul in Leeds, actually. James, Paul says, just wow. That's James Mathewson sums up why Labour are finished.
Yeah, I know what your viewers think of me, David, because every time I come on here afterwards, I get about 20 emails calling me the worst names imaginable.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Why are you talking over me? Let me finish.
Because I'm in charge.
All right, okay, great. What happens is every time I come on here, and it's the same thing, and there's no, I mean, I would hope you would call this out, of course, and I know you would. But the emails that I always get from talkTV viewers are always racial in nature as well. It's awful. You've got some really horrible racist viewers out there who I know you obviously wouldn't tolerate, but Some of them are absolutely dreadful, and they call me horrible, dreadful things.
I condemn all racism.
All of the UK media. I do all of the UK media, and I get the worst abuse.
Why would you get racist?
When I come on here.
Obviously, racism in all forms is absolutely unacceptable.
Mm.
Why would you get racist emails? That seems very strange to me.
No, like calling me an N-word lover, a P-word lover, an immigrant lover, all of this stuff. These are your viewers. They say that I'm obviously, I'm part of the global elite, and there's, all this conspiratorial kind of Trump MAGA type language that you hear. And some of your viewers, unfortunately, hold those views, which is a real shame.
If it is true that these are unpleasant emails, I'm very sorry for that, and they should not be acceptable. But let's just go back to the issues at hand. Charlie made some excellent points just before the break. Charlie, do you just want to succinctly just put that back to James, what you were saying, which I think, to paraphrase, was that if Labour can't see the problems, that is why Labour has lost?
Yes, they were some excellent points. I just wish I could remember what they were.
Well, I think, all right, then
I agreed with them, by the way. I agreed with them. Everything Charlie said was right, yeah.
But I think that the crux of what I was trying to say was that with all of these issues going on and the way in which the voting, the way in which people have voted has shifted. These are people who are not Tories. These are people who are that might have voted in 2019 for the Tory party. That's what brought them the red wall in 2019. But they've clearly deserted Labour as well. They deserted the Tories after 5 years, after the last generation. They've deserted the Labour Party after just 9 months, it seems. So something has gone wrong. And I was just trying to make the point that I think that there needs to be recognition at the heart of the government as to why that is, because they've been dealing with maybe issues that are not the bread and butter issues that the public want. And the public don't believe the spin, maybe because they've heard it before, or because they genuinely don't believe about things like, well, if we've got to take away the winter fuel allowance, it's because of hard decisions that they've got to make on the back of 14 years, or is it political decision-making? I think people, everyday working people will find it difficult, and I'm being genuine, I'm not being sort of overly political, but I think, the choice between starting up GB Energy, which nobody maybe understands or really appreciates, or giving public sector pay rises day one, scrapping a Rwanda policy, which, costed a lot of money, absolutely. We didn't see the effects of that policy because it was scrapped on day one. So you scrap a deterrent when it comes to illegal immigration, you pay out to public sector workers, all the while you're increasing national insurance contributions on the backbone of our economy, which is people that run their businesses, taking away the winter fuel allowance, and getting rid of a deterrent, regardless of how much it paid, on the number one issue that people care about, which is tackling migration. People find that odd. Worse than odd, they find that obviously wrong, which is why they voted reform. And so the Labour Party must recognise that.
James, what comes up time and time on the door is immigration, legal and illegal immigration, the pressure on public services, people not being able to get a doctor's appointment, dentist's appointment. People want to see an end to it. Labour said they would smash the gangs. The numbers have gone up exponentially, over 11,000 arrivals this year alone. That's a 40% increment on last year. It's total failure.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think for many years now, the issue of immigration especially has been a very uncomfortable one for many people to talk about on the left. They didn't really know what their position was on it, and what their view about immigration is. But vastly still, if you ask people on the left, they will come up with different kind of views and opinions on immigration and what's right. You go right from people who are pro everything, open borders, very small minority of people, normally in the Green Party, right the way through to people who believe in controlled and checked immigration. Now, it's about everybody's different opinion on this. I do not believe that everybody who has voted for reform or everybody who even brings up the issue of immigration as a concern is, a zealot in the issue, and want to see people punished or want to see boats turned back and all the rest of it. There is a way to do this that is managed and succinct. Now, I believe the issue, having seen this firsthand when I worked in Parliament, comes from years and years of austerity cuts, to the Home Office, and the Home Office trying to rejig what it did. The waiting lists in the Home Office for asylum applications are absolutely outrageous and ridiculous.
But James, with the greatest of respect, many of these illegal migrants are not coming here because they're asylum seekers. They're men of economic working age. Well, we know this is true. They're chucking their passports in the sea. If you come here illegally, surely you should be deported immediately.
Really, I don't really care, David, because if you come here and you make an asylum claim, it needs to be processed by the country you make the asylum claim in. If we think we are that weak of a nation and we are that incapable of processing paperwork that we cannot do asylum applications, then I'm sorry, we should just pack it in and go home. These people have a right. You have a right. It is a fundamental human right, if you claim asylum, to be able to have your asylum case looked at and considered. The question is that we come down to is, what do you do with the people in the meantime while their asylum claim is being processed? The asylum claim shouldn't take a year to process. That's the problem here. You know, this problem hasn't just appeared overnight. It's been years and years of underfunding, changes to the Home Office being run absolutely terribly, and with more rhetoric than action coming out of the Home Office about dinghies and about small boats and all the rest of it. I could not care what somebody's reason is for coming to the UK. They have a right to put in the paperwork. If that's then rejected, then they get deported and they get sent home. That's right. But how you process them people in the meantime, I understand. It's a bit like prisons. People don't want to put the money in where they see, you know, undeserving people in their mind or attention. But unfortunately, these are functions of state and they have to be carried out.
Charlie, final word.
Well, look, I agree. Again, up to point. I mean, look, the Home Office has not been fit for purpose for many, many years. That was Labour Home Secretary John Reid that said that years ago, that the Home Office is not fit for purpose. And so we know that there are issues there. But what the British people fundamentally have a problem with, look, James is right. It shouldn't take long to process somebody's application. But that's the horror that the British people have to face day in, day out, when they see swathes of people coming in on boats, knowing that their process will take such a long time that they're going to have to foot the bill for their hotel accommodation, or for their stay, or for their benefits, or for whatever else that you are able to claim and receive just by appearing on shores. When you are not a genuine asylum seeker, of course every claim has to be processed, but it's the case that many people just come here to chance their arm because they're economic migrants. They're not fleeing for the reasons that we would naturally accept people coming into this country. So it's about fairness. And for far too long, the British people have felt that they are not being treated fairly, that the government is currently part of, as you said earlier on, I think, David, which was quite well summarised, an Islington metropolitan elite North London lawyer said, that doesn't actually get the politics of what the British public are interested in, what the British people care for, and that's why, on the back of Tory failures of the past, this current Labour failure in the present, and that's why they're looking to reform for the future.
Gentlemen, thanks ever so much for your time. Charlie Rowley, former Conservative advisor, James Mathewson, former Labour advisor. Your thoughts on all of that, please, after the break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Welcome back. 8:47. We'll take a call. Scott is on the line from Portsmouth. Good morning, Scott.
Morning, David. Great show.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to answer your question about Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
You really have to wonder, is the man a total narcissist?
Go on.
I mean, you suffer such a damning defeat, and the only answer is to say, well, I'm just going to continue on with the policies that people have voted against, and I'm going to carry on faster. It's ridiculous.
It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. And all these people saying that voting for reform is a protest vote. No, it's a vote for change. People want something different.
Do you know, I was with Nigel Farage, was it last night or the night before, and we were at a party in Kent celebrating, obviously, how well Reform had done. And he actually brought this up, saying that all the mainstream media are saying the vote for Reform, it's just a protest vote away from the two main parties. Both
Absolutely
of those
not.
tribal parties are arrogant enough to think their voters, who did vote for them in the past, are going to go back to them.
People's intelligence.
Yes, it is.
It really is.
What would you say to James Matthewson there, who, for some unknown reason, seems to be obsessed with trans ideology? What would you say to him? Because he was essentially downplaying what Reform had achieved.
I would say his arrogant ideological belief is exactly the problem that people are voting against. It's ignorance to the core. I mean, you look at the three figureheads of Reform: Richard, Nigel and Zia, three successful businessmen who I believe can turn this country around, and then Labour, ideological dreamers.
I mean, it was interesting, actually, on that BBC debate, I asked one of the Cabinet Ministers, I said, how many people in Cabinet have actually run a business? And she said,
not very many.
Well, she said to me, I've worked for a business, and I said, that's not the question I'm asking. I'm asking, how many people in Cabinet have run a business? And the answer to that is zero.
Honestly, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I wasn't lucky enough to even get a vote because they cancelled our elections, which makes you furious again. And how much worse would the defeat have been?
Oh, yeah, of course, because you're in Portsmouth. So 5.5 million people denied the vote, by the way. That's in Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Surrey, Sussex and Hampshire.
It's incredible. And Portsmouth Council are actually trying to fight against the devolution.
It's going to be
crazy.
It's going to be fascinating. Scott, thanks very much for your call. We'll take a quick break. Lots more still to come. So many messages coming in as well. We will be speaking after the break to university student Harry Aldridge on what impact the elections will have on the younger vote. That's still to come. Good morning.
I think we're coming to the end of an era. We're coming to the end of this progressive era, that the so-called progressive era, that the Conservative Party could do nothing about. They couldn't handle it. They didn't know. They didn't have an ethos. They didn't have a philosophy. And now it's time for a kind of conservative revolution, I suppose, and Reform are the party to produce that conservative revolution.
Are we at the end of the progressive era, Benjamin?
I actually think we're at the end of the Thatcherite consensus, to be honest, because ever since the 80s, the argument has been it doesn't matter where it's produced.
This is Talk. Wow, what a feisty morning. 8:52 on Sunday, May the 4th. I'm joined by Harry Aldridge, who is a university student. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Did you vote?
I did vote.
So the excitement for me is actually, I think young people are pretty energised by politics. They are voting for a range of parties. What's your experience been of this election? Were you engaged, enthused, excited by it?
Well, I was excited by the election. I think it was the first chance for people to have their say on the new government since the general election. So I think people were keen to have their say, keen to voice their concerns, keen to maybe talk about the issues which they were concerned about. I think for me, this was my second time voting. I had a chance to vote in the general election, and it was a good opportunity to kind of show how I was thinking, how Labour are getting on, really.
And what did you think?
Well, I did vote for Labour at the local elections.
What?
Because I think they've taken some positive steps in the right direction,
like
and
what?
I think the direction of progress is positive. So, for example,
Yes.
in the NHS, waiting lists have fallen by 200,000 since Labour came to office. We know that across 750 schools now, free breakfast clubs are being piloted. I think they're positive steps in the right direction.
I was involved in bringing in free breakfast clubs a long, long time ago, but OK, I'll give you that win for the moment. Carry on. What about the economy?
Well, I think on the economy, they just inherited a huge number...
No, they didn't.
Well, I think they did inherit a huge number of
We were
challenges.
starting to see economic incline, actually, in the latter days of the Conservative government. But then they gave all the pay rises to the state sectors. And, of course, what we've seen is the attacks they've done on the farmers, on people with land. So with regards to everything they've done, employer national insurance contributions. Do you like all of that?
Well, you talked about kind of the economic improvements at the end of the Conservative government. Well, that came immediately after a recession. And I think the government were right to actually give money to public sector workers where they were striking. I mean, in 2023, for example, NHS strikes cost £1.7 billion. Taking action is the positive thing to do there. It gets people back to work.
They want more, though, don't they? They're coming back for more.
Well, they might do in the future, but what it did at that time was it got people back to work, and that's the only reason why waiting lists are falling now, is because doctors, nurses, they're all back to work, and they're able to bring those waiting lists down.
Just in terms of that result, Labour got absolutely slaughtered. The Tories got more slaughtered. But when you look at reform getting a 30% vote share, that translates into a parliamentary majority for reform. Now, Keir Starmer says, I hear what you're saying, and then continues in the same direction.
Well, I think what the people were voting for reform because they were yearning for change, and I think meaningful change in politics...
So you're saying it's a protest vote?
Well, I think largely it was. I think people...
Why do you say that?
Well, I think it was a protest vote to the extent that people are angry about the state of politics, they're feeling disillusioned, and they feel reform offers an alternative.
Ah, that's different to a protest vote.
Well, I think it's kind of similar because it's an alternative from the main two-party system, and people do see it as a protest vote.
Voting... They're different, because a protest vote is where you would go to a party, but then what those two arrogant parties are expecting is that those voters will go back to them in any other election. I don't think that's true.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, we'll have to see what happens, but I think people were voting for reform and because they have a number of very genuine frustrations about the state of the economy, about their living standards. And actually, Keir Starmer saying he's going to continue with the plan he's already implemented. Well, I think we've seen some positive things happen from that plan. And actually, in 4 years' time, people will be judging the Labour government on whether their living standards are improving. And Keir Starmer needs to do what he thinks is possible in order to achieve that.
Heartbroken farmers. Front page of the Express. That's not great, is it?
Well, I mean, I'm from Devon, so I totally...
So you should know what farmers feel.
I mean, we have over 20,000 farmers in Devon. I totally understand why people are so frustrated about that.
Suicidal farmers?
But I would say...
This is the Labour government.
Well, I would say that, firstly, the Labour government had to raise significant sums of money.
What, by clobbering farmers?
Well, I mean, when you look at all the public services from the NHS to our education system, they were all in crisis.
Putting VAT on private schools as well.
Again, I think that's a positive step.
Why is it? Those people who have taken their kids out of the independent sector are already paying... into the independent sector, are already paying for state schools. So none of this makes sense. It's ideology, isn't it?
Well, no, I think it's a pragmatic thing to do.
What?
I think state schools need more money, and private schools, they're not charities. They don't deserve a tax break.
But you're increasing the numbers of people going into state education. We've got examples now of kids being ferried by taxi loads of miles because there are no state places.
I don't think there hasn't been this huge exodus of students into the state sector, and money is being raised for the state sector from this policy. But it's also about fairness. I mean, I attended a state school.
Is it fair to take the winter fuel allowance away from elderly people?
On the private school point, I attended state school for all of my life. I know that private schools enjoyed huge advantages over state schools, and they shouldn't therefore... Well, I mean, they had smaller class sizes, they had greater access to extracurricular activities. That benefits them, for example, when they're applying to university.
But they're paying for that, and it's choice.
Of course, and taxpayers shouldn't be subsidising that choice. They should not deserve
Why are they subsidising it?
Well, because it's got a tax break. Taxpayers are...
It's not a tax break.
Well, it is.
It's not a tax break. So, for example, VAT doesn't apply to universities.
I think that's a completely different scenario.
Why is it? It's education.
Well, because students from a range of different socioeconomic backgrounds will go to university, whereas it's mainly the wealthiest people who will go to private.
That is utterly untrue. So there are lots of people who work 2, 3, 4 jobs to send their kids to private school, and they don't have holidays in Mallorca all the time, and they don't drive a Range Rover, they drive some claptrap thing because they believe their children's education is paramount.
Yeah, and I totally accept that.
And now you're clobbering them.
I don't accept that they're being clobbered. I think this is a fair choice to invest more money into the state sector.
Net zero?
When you look over the past decade, per pupil funding fell by 9%, whereas private schools enjoyed small class sizes, enjoyed access to amazing spaces. They shouldn't deserve...
OK, what about... time is so tight now. Net zero. The folly of net zero. That's what people voted against.
I think actually using more renewable forms of energy is a positive thing. It would drive down bills, and it means we're not reliant on...
What do you mean? The bills are going up.
It means we're not reliant on international gas markets, which Vladimir Putin can control and manipulate.
So why don't we just have our own gas and frack?
Well, I think fracking would be an appalling idea. Well, I mean, Quadrilla said that fracking would be totally infeasible in this country. And I mean, when you look at fracking, it would take a huge amount of water, it would take a huge amount of resources, a huge amount of money, when we could be investing in renewable forms of energy, which we know will cut bills. But it will take time, and that's what people said at this election, that meaningful change hasn't happened yet. But in the long term, if we continue with, I think, what Keir Starmer's doing, we can see more renewable forms of energy, and that will help to cut bills in the long run.
Finally, very quickly, is Keir Starmer the right man to lead Labour?
Yes.
Thank you, Harry. Very good to talk to you. Harry Aldridge, their university student, voted Labour, will continue to vote Labour. Keep all your messages coming in, please. After the break, we're going to talk more about politics. John Boothman will join me. He's the political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. That's all still to come. Good morning.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has...
Very good morning to you. Just after 9 o'clock on Sunday, May the 4th, final hour of Weekend Breakfast. If you have just joined us, where have you been? And I am back, back off the political campaign trail. Wow, what a few days that has been. I don't know what day it is. I haven't had much sleep. But anyway, I'm back and great to see you this morning. Now, great news. It's International Organ Day today, a day that promotes appreciation for the vast grandeur of an instrument that breathes life into vast spaces, creating intricate melodies with majestic performance. And there is a Tamar organ from my very own church in Framlingham. So there you are, only 3 Tamar organs actually left in the United Kingdom. It's Worldwide Firefighters Day today, a day that celebrates those courageous men and women who put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe.
He's always on the scene, fireman Sam, and his engine's bright and clean. Fireman Sam, you can know.
And also, today is May the 4th. It's Star Wars Day, that's right. May the 4th be with you. Right, let's move on to this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Golly, on this day in 1982, 20 sailors were killed when the destroyer HMS Sheffield was hit by an Argentinian Exocet missile during the Falklands War, 1982. The Falklands National Monument in Cardiff bears the names of the 255 sailors, soldiers and airmen who died on the UK side. On this day in 1984, I don't know if you remember her, I certainly do, the death of Diana Dawes. The English equivalent of the blonde bombshells of Hollywood. She described herself as the only sex symbol Britain had produced since Lady Godiva. On this day in 2014, science students at the University of Leicester concluded that the wooden puppet Pinocchio, as we know, of course, Pinocchio used to tell lies, and when he told lies, his nose would double in length for each lie. Now, these very clever university students at the University of Leicester then realised, and they did some maths behind it. So if that was the case and his nose doubled every lie he told, how many lies could he tell before he fell over? And the answer was 13. After 13 lies, it was concluded that his nose would be 140 metres long, and the force exerted downwards would cause his neck to snap. That's nice, isn't it? Those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Good morning, 6 minutes past 9. By now, hopefully you've seen the front pages of all the newspapers. Reform UK, as you can imagine, on the front page here. Young need a moral re-education. This is Zia Youssef, the party's chairman, saying that actually what needs to happen, reform, if it got into government, would be more transformational than even Margaret Thatcher's government. They talk about the manifesto, 20% tax relief on school fees, a patriotic curriculum, a ban on transgender ideology in the classroom, 2-year degrees and a doubling of the number of pupil referral units so schools can work safely. Also, getting rid of the madness of net zero, green initiatives as well. Kemi Badenoch has no idea how to reply to what went on. She issued an apology, front page of the Daily Telegraph. We will not chase Farage to the right, is what she says. Well, what are you going to do, Kemi? Also, the knives are out. I was sitting with Robert Jenrick the other night, and I said to him, I think the Tories are toast, and he really didn't like that. But I think there's some truth in that. The Tories now need to work out what they do. They lost control, by the way, of every single council. Every single council they controlled. I think it's fair to say it was pretty abominable in terms of the result. And this is a really sad story in the Sunday Express. Heartbroken farmers, suicidal. This is the tax that Rachel Reeves has imposed on farmers. I just want to put the case for farmers. If you want the country to be thinner, then we need good homegrown food. And being a farmer is blinking hard work. And many of these farms actually don't make a great deal of money. And of course, Rachel Reeves and her Islington chums have no idea how the countryside works. They've probably never even bothered to go. Lots of stories, and of course Prince Harry all over the papers as well. He did this interview, which I kind of missed because I was in the middle of the election, but the backlash against him is growing. The fact is, he's weaponising his father's illness, saying, I don't know how long my father has got, and he just looks increasingly insane as far as I can see. Keep all these messages coming in. Also, James Mathewson earlier accused Reform UK of being controlled by multimillionaires. Many of you getting in touch about that. David, Reform have started with very successful business people used to having budgets and strategies proving they can run a P-up in a brewery, unlike the civil servant Labour front bench. I mentioned earlier, I actually said to the Cabinet Ministers, how many of you have actually run a business? Answer, none. David, I was speaking to a County Durham teacher yesterday. She told me that colleagues were referring to the Reform win as racism. On a positive note, she told me that a lot of pupils seem to be keen on voting Reform. Well, that is definitely true. Well done, David, in your robust response to James Mathewson. He still does not have a clue. I've had more than enough of so-called progressive politics. And as to not accepting that common sense is pretty much the same for everybody, does he not understand the meaning of the word common? That's Catherine in Cardiff. Thank you for that and good morning. Cliff in Berkshire, good morning. Labour no longer represents the labouring classes. The Conservatives don't want to conserve anything, and the Lib Dems are neither liberal nor democratic. All of the main parties cross-dress, so to speak, and they've lost their identity. If the parties don't know who they are, how can they expect the electorate to know who they are? David, James Mathewson admits the Labour and Tory parties don't know which direction to go. Why would anyone vote for them then? A political party has to have voters, a vision, and the plan to achieve that vision. If it's a vision the voters like, they'll support it. That's George. Thank you for that. Dorothy in East Kilbride, good morning to you. Britons are sick of being second-class citizens. James Mathewson talks utter hogwash. People are sick of the trans ideology, immigration, cost of living, everything else he talks about. When they run down Reform, they're running down how the majority of this country actually thinks. Get James Mathewson off. He's an idiot. Thank you for that. Fee in Berkshire, good morning. James, on your show. If he's a former Labour advisor and the current advisors still spat the same rhetoric, then no wonder they're going down the pan. Tides are turning. Listen to the citizens of your country. We have had enough of the lies. Great show. Thank you. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. I don't think I've done this one. Tim, James Mathewson is talking rubbish. What's on the inside is the core. The core affects the outside. It's common sense. We want no immigration, net zero, 1.5 million houses. Only 10% to be social housing. I think I did do that earlier, actually. OMG, David, James and Charlie, no wonder Reform are doing so well. Congratulations to Reform for all their successes now and in the future. Just one more, Peter, this is quite droll. Has Charlie got a sore throat from continually trying to defend the Tories' position in the face of the Reform onslaught? We'll talk more about politics now. Joining me is John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. Good morning, John.
How are you, David?
Oh, good. I mean, let me just tell you, it's been a roller coaster of, I don't know which day it is. I've been obviously heavily involved in what is going on. It's been quite a seismic week, hasn't it?
Look, I mean, there's no superlatives left to describe the scale of the victory that Reform UK had this week, and Nigel Farage in particular. I mean, you know, this is a guy who's come from nothing. He's influenced UK politics and European politics, you could argue, in the international scene for many years now. And I think what happened on Thursday came as a shock, not just to the other political parties, but the scale of it is the thing that's important. 677 seats out of 1,600 must have come as a great surprise to even people in the Reform Party.
Yes, I think that's fairly true. I think to manage expectations, my line was that if we won 200 councillors, that was a good night. Actually, in my head, it was 400. But when you get to the likes of late 600s, that is pretty astounding. I was on this programme on BBC One for 2 days, pretty much, and in front of a smattering different ministers and shadow ministers coming in. The looks on their faces were absolutely a joy to behold.
Yeah, look, that's the most difficult job in politics, appearing on an election programme, not when you're winning, but when you're losing. You're there to apologise, you're there to actually just get through the night. But look, I think it would be fair to say that on the one hand, it's a fantastic victory, but as Labour have shown in the past year, governing and running councils in this case is a bit harder than winning elections.
I would agree with that. And of course, if you look at those councils that were up for grabs, they are £12.5 billion in debt. That gives you an interest payment of £1.3 million every single day. Where do you stand on the idea, and this was the accusation keep being levelled at me, saying, well, you lot have got absolutely no experience of running things. My riposte to that was, well, you lot have got experience and you've made a right old mess of it.
Look, I think there's a whole load of difficulties, in particular in local government. They've been starved of resources for many years. There's always a big turnover of people in politics. What is going to be interesting now is to see what reform do locally. There will be, interesting alliances will need to be formed. You won't be able to take forward some of the big policy areas that the Reform UK Party talk about all the time. And then, of course, there's always that thing that happens at a local level of personalities. And all these things can be, damaging to political parties going forward.
So, in this section, I'm meant to be talking about the week in politics, which we started doing. Who's had a good week? Who's had a bad week? What we should look forward to in the week ahead, and also who should have a week off. Now, let's start, and it might be an easy one this week, but who's had a good week?
Oh, look, you can't get away from Nigel Farage. Look, he's the great disruptor of British politics. He's disrupted the whole political system. Nobody has come in I don't know how long, how many decades from where Farage and Reform have been to the position they got to on Thursday. Top of that poll, extrapolations suggesting that more than 30% would happen at a national level as a result of those results. I mean, as I said already, he's already been hugely influential over Brexit, and now this is another stage, another phase, another, big platform that Reform have now got as they move on to the next bit. I mean, I think what's happening now is we're going to see in the next month a wee bit of attention paid to where I stay, north of the border. There's a by-election in Hamilton for the Scottish Parliament. Now, Reform haven't done quite as well, though they are doing very well in Scotland, as they've done south of the border, so that's worth the watching. And then all the attention will turn over the coming year to what happens in Scotland and in Wales and some English elections.
I mean, that's absolutely fascinating, and I'm in touch with the Scottish contingent. Now, you're right. The politics of Scotland is changing dramatically, isn't it? The SNP's dominance over Scottish politics is well and truly over, as far as I can see.
Well, not so much, because the fracturing of the vote on the other side of the fence between Labour, the Liberal Democrats and Reform and the Conservatives means that basically votes go off in different directions, and as a result of that, the SNP can do quite well next year. Any of the opinion polls are telling us at the moment that the SNP are on 35%, and all of the other parties are round about 20 or below. So that's going to be, there is some truth when people say in Scotland that if you vote Reform and there's a fracture of that vote, that it will benefit the SNP.
Yeah, I still believe passionately you should vote with your heart and vote for the party that best summarises the way that you think. So then the question is, if that was an easy one, maybe this is an easy one. Who's had a bad week?
Oh, look, I'm going for Morgan McSweeney. That's the bloke, the chief of staff for Keir Starmer. He's the guy who advises, sets the political direction for what's going on. Now, he's had an absolutely terrible week, and we're going to have to see what Labour do now in response. Any of the ideas that I'm looking at in the papers this morning, that they could change some personnel in a reshuffle, get rid of the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, get rid of Lisa Nandy at Culture. I mean, that's not going to do very much in terms of changing Labour's fortunes. There's a bigger question about what they could do about policy. Now, they've already started tentatively moving away, I think, from the net zero agenda. Are they going to go further on that? I've got an interest in that in Scotland, where, you know, could they do something further in terms of oil and gas in Scotland, which is an industry which really is on the way down to a certain degree. And as you said earlier, making sure that, you know, rather than importing oil and gas, we can do something about that. Can they be harder on immigration is another thing that people have spoken about. But look, you can't out-reform reform. Reform have been very, very clear about what they do. So McSweeney has got a big, big task.
This is really interesting, actually, that it was Reform that pushed the Labour government over Scunthorpe and said you have to step in and make sure we keep a virgin steel plant in this country. I agree with you. The oil and gas licences, if we allow Scotland to boom once again and allow us to extract our oil and gas, by the way, we have absolutely tons of it, we bring down energy prices, that allows companies to do well. It encourages companies and factories to do well as well, and increases prosperity for the people of Scotland. To me, that's a no-brainer.
Well, look, you know, what's happened under the Conservatives and now under Labour is that they say they're not going to grant any more licences for exploration. There's some licences out there. There's some discussion going on about two big fields, Rosebank and Jackdaw fields, and we think that they will eventually go ahead, though that's been delayed for a bit. Yeah, you would argue that, you know, you should be extracting the maximum economic value from the North Sea, particularly in a country that's in crisis. I think, you know, my bigger issue round about the whole net zero issue is that, you know, to a certain extent internationally, it doesn't really matter that much what the UK does. We've got to be looking to see about what China's doing, what the United States are doing. We're a very, very small part of what happens internationally with net zero. You know, that's not to say that, you know, we shouldn't be having, I would argue, you know, more in the way of renewables in terms of solar panels and the likes, and we need to do something about insulation. A big programme of insulation sponsored by the government around the country would benefit everybody. But we need to look at the resources we've got, and we need to do something about actually increasing those resources, like in the North Sea, which would help the prosperity across the UK.
I would agree. Right, let's move on. Who should we keep an eye on this week?
Look, the thing I'm fascinated, you know, it's political. The thing I'm fascinated by this week is the conclave in Rome, which begins on Wednesday. There's a guy that I think we're all watching called Pietro Parolin, who's the Vatican Secretary of State. He seems to be the favourite. He's been called a Francis clone. He's somebody who's a liberal. Looks a bit of a mug's game, this, to be quite honest, predicting who the next pope's going to be. Nobody thought that Bergoglio was going to be the pope the last time. But I think because of the film Conclave, the other film Two Popes, we've all got an amazing fascination with this.
Yes.
And I'm fascinated by it. You know, is it, I think, 133 cardinals. They go into a room and they're going to work out who is the leader of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, and I probably shouldn't say this, but on a particular betting app, there is a Pope bet, so you can bet on who you think is going to be Pope. I think I went for Luis Antonio Tegel.
Well, he's an interesting guy. He would be. He's been called the Asian Francis.
Yes.
He's a Filipino. He's somebody who's I think he's in charge of the world's Catholic missions. He would be the first Asian Pope. I don't know. I just kind of feel that maybe there's a big lobby at the moment to get back to having an Italian. I mean, I know that sounds a bit basic, but Parolin is the Secretary of State, really the Foreign Secretary at the Vatican at the moment. He's 70 years old. He's probably quite young.
Yes, it is.
And I think, you know, maybe the Curia want to get back to that. But look, as I say, it's a bit of a mug's game choosing who the next Pope's going to be. Let's see whether it's a short conclave, and let's see how quickly that white smoke comes.
Yes, quite right. And finally, John, who should have a week off?
Well, look, you've been talking about how you've not had any sleep in the past few days. You know, I've been there at election programmes and I know how long these go on. My nomination for that this week is Professor Sir John Curtis.
Yes!
Sir John Curtis, right? I mean, he's been with me anyway in Scotland for about 30 years. I've known him for a very, very long time. You know, over these election periods like you, he goes without sleep for about 48 hours. He's become a kind of national institution. Every time you switch the telly on during elections, there's this guy. His hair's always a bit dishevelled. He looks a bit kind of geeky. I think he's an amazing character, and the fact that he's lasted so long is a testimony to how good he is.
Yeah.
Try the forecasting of exit polls, particularly in general elections, is something that's fraught with complexity and difficulty, and the fact that he's got that mostly right for so long is just absolutely incredible. So, Professor Sir John, get some sleep, get out there in your this week and have a bit of a rest.
Well, I agree. So I started on Thursday on TV at 10 p.m. I finally got some sleep at about 5:30 a.m. John Curtis is still going, and I am significantly younger. I was then back on air at midday. John Curtis is still going. I'm then still going till 5. John Curtis is still going.
73 years old. He's just, you know, he's a force of nature, and long may he continue.
Yeah, I agree. Really good to talk to you, John. Thanks ever so much. John Boothman, their political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. Right, after the break, we're going to have a bit of a gear change. I'm going to talk about Prince Harry. He's been criticised for saying he doesn't know how much longer his father have, which is a very crass comment indeed. Also, the King is being deployed against Donald Trump. He's going to open the Canadian Parliament. And guess what? Princess Charlotte is 10. We'll talk about that after the break.
I think it spells really big trouble for both main parties. The Conservatives, that trouble right now is more acute. I think the Conservatives have been left fighting not just for their political relevance, but even for their existence at the moment. So yes, there's a lot of talk about how we're in this now multi-party political system, which we absolutely are, and the results yesterday point to that. However, there is a real risk for the Conservatives that they are supplanted by Reform. Not just that they're fighting neck and neck with them in a difficult position in various constituencies, but that they are completely overtaken.
Good morning, welcome back. Sharon Miller, Sharon in Staffordshire. Good morning, Dr. Bull. I missed you yesterday. Yeah, I was having a little bit of a nap. Well, I'm sure Reform can do a better job than any of those two useless governments that we have running the country at the moment. Good morning, David. I'm pretty sure these lefties get high sniffing their own, I have to paraphrase this, flatus, because they don't half come out with some ridiculous nonsense. That's David in South Wales. Thanks for that. Lots of others about James as well. David, I'm aghast at James Matthewson, particularly when he claims Labour hasn't done anything yet. What? Increasing NI so the economy crashes, winter fuel allowance, farmers' land, removing the only deterrent for illegals, net zero, increasing council tax when Keir Starmer said he wouldn't, huge public sector pay rises. I could go on. Hello again, David. This is Peter. Good morning. Thank goodness for talkTV and its consistent common sense approach to fair broadcasting. Even its nearest comparison channel doesn't now offer the freedom of speech to its presenters. As for the so-called mainstream news channels, they're not worth wasting time on. Thank you for that. Zia Youssef is a superb chairman of Reform UK and a proud Muslim, adored by Reform UK voters. That's Tony. David, Keir, this is Stuart. Keir is well aware of actions that will reduce immigrants, but he's decided he doesn't want to. Until Keir has the will to stop the migrants, the conveyor belt of illegals arriving will continue and increase. I don't know if I did this earlier. Good morning, David. There are 18 Muslim countries that ban the burqa, some of them Muslim countries. So why is it a problem to do the same in an officially Christian country, except fear of being called racist, which is ridiculous. And then one more on this. Nigel and Billericay. Dr. David, great show as always. Thank you. And with Dr. Raj. In 2011, France banned the wearing of face coverings, including the burqa, in public spaces except for religious purposes or in private vehicles. This law, which has been upheld by the European Court of Human Rights, aims to ensure public safety, security and the free expression of individuals. The ban also extends to religious symbols like the hijab and abayas in state schools, and that's Nigel in Billericay. And I'm asking this morning, is it time we finally ban the burqa? Because I think it is time, and I think we should do it. And someone suggested earlier it should be Reform UK policy. Your thoughts? 0344 499 1000. Daniel's on the line from Epsom. Good morning.
Morning, David. Love the show. How you doing?
Yeah, all right. All right, thanks. Nice to be back, actually. It's been a bit crazy.
Well, you've been a bit busy, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Your guest earlier, James, him and the other guy were talking about common sense, and they were talking about things that make sense to the electorate, and James was sort of blinkered to it because I think the majority of people out there are just like me, right? I look at this Labour government and I think, how can you, on one hand, allow hundreds of thousands of people into my country against our wishes, put them up in hotels, give them my money, feed them, whilst you persecute our own pensioners and you persecute our own farmers? That's common sense. If you look at the number on the MI5 Islamic terror watch list, today it's about 50,000 people. We're in 1995, that number was 0. So there's a direct correlation between the amount of immigration you have from the Islamic third world and then subsequent terrorism and problems. So it's clear to see in the time and the data. So why would you continue to Why would you continue to allow mass uncontrolled immigration from the third world? Everyone out there, the majority of people in the country are aware it's destroying the fabric of Britain. You can see it ruining the country. You can see the decline and the degradation. Ordinary people have been telling successive governments, for that matter, for 30, 40 years, we don't want this. We've never wanted it. Even black guys that I grew up with from London are saying to me now, this isn't where we grew up. The place has gone to the dogs. So it sort of got to the point now where even people on the left, so people on the left that live in London are getting sexually harassed, they're getting their phones stolen, they get beaten up.
Oh, yeah.
They're now coming round to the way that the majority are thinking, but there's still this minority like James and the Starmer and the upper middle class sort of metropolitan avocado on toast types that refuse to see the obvious and the clear, and they refuse to see what we can see, and because of that, Reform are gonna wipe the floor with them, because Reform are only a mirror to how the majority of British people think and feel. And that's all they are. They're not doing anything revolutionary. They're just there holding up a mirror to how most people think and feel, right? And I think most British people are fair, and I don't think that Reform are so-called far right, but I do think that people have had. We all know we've had far too much immigration of all kinds for far too long, and we see it destroying Britain, and we don't want it anymore. And I think that's fair to say, David.
I think it's very fair to say. Very pithy, pertinent, Daniel. Thank you very much for your call this morning. That's Daniel in Epsom. Right, let's talk about some royal news. Joining me now, Caroline Aston, who's a royal commentator. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning to you.
Lots to talk about this morning. This Prince Harry thing, I missed this because I was in the middle of the election, but obviously we had the ruling about Raveg. Prince Harry then does a sit-down interview, which I think is jaw-dropping, and he then brings in this notion that he's desperate for reconciliation with his family and he's very hard done by, and that he doesn't know how long his father has got. A, that's jaw-dropping, and B, I think it's totally out of order.
Well, I think you're right. It's a crass comment. But let's go back to Sir Geoffrey Voss, Master of the Rolls' judgment about this appeal, because I think his summing up of the whole thing is very succinct. He accepts that the Prince is frustrated, thinks he's been badly treated, but quite clearly that doesn't add up to a solid legal argument to make him win his appeal. He lost. End of. Forensic examination. So we then segue almost seamlessly across to this interview given to the BBC out in America. An interview, I would point out, that was supposed to last 10 minutes and went on for about 30 minutes instead. And, I was very minded of the now notorious Oprah Winfrey interview back in 2021, when the prosecution presented its case, but there was not a single bit of defence offered. And I think the BBC have had to already apologise for the fact that some of the comments made were not followed up, were not forensically questioned, leading to a very skewed thing indeed. In fact, I have to say, you could hear the jingle of the Golden Royal rattle being, thrown out of the platinum playpen, couldn't you?
Well, I would agree totally. The whole interview is extraordinary, where he says he would love a reconciliation. Then he brings his father's illness into this. He is totally tone deaf, isn't he? So we've gone through the proceedings. Ravec has made their decision on, or the court has made the decision on Ravec. For me, it's really simple. You took your toys, you went to America, you no longer have protection from this country because we're not paying for you.
Well, quite, and I would just say this, in normal everyday life, if you sign on to work for a company, a firm, knowing what your package is, knowing what it consists of, you do the job for a bit and then you think, hang on a minute, I'm not really comfortable here, I'll do another job. You don't take the package with you. If you relocate outside this country, etc., well, do you really expect to enjoy the perks you had when you were a working royal? You decided to go to another country, you decided to become, and let me quote, financially independent. And that dependence was, of course, based on marketing yourself. And one of the means of marketing himself was to write Spare. And I would say that anything is likely to upgrade the danger to you. It's to tell people publicly for money that, of course, you killed 24 Taliban. I'd say that was nailing quite a big target on your back. And come to think of it, why is this country so much more dangerous than America, where gun crime is endemic, or than Nigeria, Colombia, or any of the other places where the Sussexes have gone on these faux royal visits? And indeed, why try and recreate a lifestyle you so signally left behind when you left this country? The whole thing doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't.
I'd hate to be one of the PR team, well, the constantly changing PR team, attempting to advise Harry and his wife, because advice is only good, you know, if it's listened to. And from where I'm sitting, not much notice seems to be taken. The optics are bad, the words are crass, he doesn't know how long his father's got left. Well, none of us know, do we, how long we've got left? So maybe there's an argument there for Harry to pipe down, do good, use his substantial resources on good things, and not squander £1.5 million of your fortune on illegal action. He's got to pay the Home Office's costs along with his own.
Good. And serves him right. But also, at the same time, you know, he's saying he wants a reconciliation with his father. I don't know what he meant by, I don't know how long my father has got. But at the same time, he's then sort of mounting an offensive by saying, well, I know so much and I could write another book.
Yes, but that's been hovering off stage for some time, because his contract with Penguin Random House was for 3 books. And actually Spare, in the form that it was released, was a 3rd rewrite, because to begin with, they didn't think there was enough oomph in it, enough peep through some murky royal keyholes to up the sales. So what we got when it was finally released was, well, yes, this story of disaster, dog bowls, broken dreams and necklaces, and stories that when they were forensically examined didn't always quite add up with the facts as known.
No, so what happens from here? Because, of course, he talks about dark forces at work. I mean, I think he's a very lost boy. I think he can't see the wood for the trees. He's certainly not reading the writing on the wall here. And he's alienating himself from his family. Do you think he just now stops and be quiet and then, you know, hopefully some form of reconciliation might happen later down the line?
Well, you know, there's a lot to be said for that old royal motto of never complain, never explain. Sometimes silence is actually golden. You can say too much. And of course, a lot of what he said, in my opinion, showed a complete ignorance of the workings of constitutional monarchy. Expecting his father, the king, to somehow intervene in a live court case would provoke a constitutional crisis. The king is the ceremonial head of the judiciary. He can't do that.
Quite right.
But looking deeper at this, a father is a father. Blood, they say, is always thicker than water. The king is undergoing ongoing grueling treatment. He's living with cancer. And yes, the outlook, you know, may not be hugely long. But while we are there, surely, the prince should back off a little bit and not do what his father specifically asked him to. Don't make my final years a misery. And my goodness me, listening to all this stuff, Ravek portrayed almost like a secret cult somewhere with dark doings and establishment stitch-up, which of course the government has completely rejected. Ravek is supposed to be politically neutral, and there have to be royal representatives there because they're the ones in charge of the royal diary. There's a lot being made here of really stuff that if the prince bothered to analyse it or look at what he's actually saying, well, would just not be happening.
Well, I had Dr. Raj Prasad with me earlier, a consultant psychiatrist, who said there are clearly very deep issues going on. Also, this unanswered question. If you believe dark forces are amassing against you from the state, which mean you harm, why would you want the state then to make sure that you have protection? Because clearly that just doesn't make any sense.
Yes, but equally I would argue that when this saga began with Megxit back in 2020, you originally wanted to be half in and half out of the royal family. And when you're told, well, no, you're either in and you're out, off you go, see how you get on, we'll review it all in a year, let's be civilised about this. Why would you then ever have wanted to be half in something you portray to the world as so toxic it drove you to suicide? You'd want to kick the dust of the royal threshold from your feet and go to your sunlit upland of Camp Montecito and never look back, wouldn't you?
Well, quite right. Let's talk about Canada now, shall we? Because this is really interesting. Donald Trump has come out with all sorts of things. Of course, he wants to make Canada the 51st state of the United States. Not gone down particularly well with the Canadians. And, of course, it is worth remembering that the head of Canada, the King is the head of Canada, he's actually going to open the Canadian Parliament. Talk about deploying soft power.
Well, I think this is very interesting.
So do I.
This has only happened twice before. The Queen, our late Queen, opened Parliament. I think it was in 1955 and then again 22 years later.
1977.
So 57 and 77.
That's right.
That's right. So let me get my math right for a start. So this is quite something, and the King is going to open it, read the opening speech. So Carney here surely is underlying Canada's link with the British monarchy. And there's a little message to Mr. Trump there, I would say, subliminal and also obvious: don't mess with us. This is where our allegiance lies. And of course, we all know about Mr. Trump's often expressed admiration for the royal family, all it stands for. And he's had that letter delivered to him by Keir Starmer with a view to a second unprecedented state visit coming up. So this really puts the cat among the royal pigeons, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I just love the fact that the King also wore Canadian medals pinned to his naval dress uniform when he was on the HMS Prince of Wales. He then planted a tree, the red maple tree. I mean, talk about very subtle stuff here. And, of course, we haven't had time to talk about Princess Charlotte. Charlotte, her photo has been released because she's 10 years old.
Happy birthday, Princess Charlotte.
Yes, happy birthday. Don't they grow up quickly, Caroline?
Isn't she a pretty girl? She's really
she certainly is.
Princess Corker.
Well, Princess Corker it is. Caroline, such a pleasure. Thank you ever so much for talking to me today. Caroline Aston there, royal commentator. We'll go to a break. After the break, Davis Fang will be here with all the... Davis Tech will be here with all the latest Fang news. Good morning. Welcome back. This is Talk 9:45 Sunday and May the 4th. Gosh, hasn't time flown. Right, it's time for Tech Rundown.
Tech rundown.
Davis Tech joins me with all the Fang news. Good morning.
Good morning. Davis Tech, I think that's got a ring to it.
I think it has a ring to it. Right, lots going on. Let's talk about cyber attacks. It's happening everywhere, isn't it? Who's the latest?
Yeah, it's not good if you're a food retailer at the moment or a retailer at all, because currently there's been a lot of cyber attacks on British retailers. So this group called Dragon Force, you might have heard about them because they've not only attacked M&S recently, they've attacked Co-op, but now they've also attacked Harrods.
What?
And this is like really, really alarming because a lot of our data is actually stored with these retailers and we don't really realise. Like the other day,
like
I
the club
was
card, for
example.
example.
Precisely. If you want to save a little bit of money, or quite a lot these days, you have to put your club card in, and obviously, you don't want to be giving these companies that are hacked so easily all of your data. So what we found out is that although Co-op did initially claim that they had a small hack as such, the Dragon Force, the hacking group, they've come out and said that they've got over 20 million people's data, and that's on top of all of the data that they've got from M&S and also Harrods users. And although this is actually quite severe, as not only is the customer's data breached in Co-op's case, but they've also got the usernames and passwords of the staff. And there's over
You're kidding.
There's over 70,000 people who work for Co-op across the country, and things have gotten so severe that for every single Microsoft Teams meeting that they've got, you have to turn the camera on to account for everyone who's there, because they feel like that the hackers might be lurking among the management meeting. So,
golly. OK, so no end in sight for that. Let's talk about Skype. So I'm absolutely horrified. Skype is closing down.
Yeah, so, God, it's been 21 years since Skype first came onto the market. Then they were sold to Microsoft in 2011, I believe, for $8.5 billion US. And so Skype has always been there. And then we thought during COVID that perhaps, they might see an explosion of users, just like how Zoom saw it. However, while there was a small leap, it seems like that Skype, didn't quite get that same level of success. And now it turns out that, there was an announcement a few months ago that Skype was going to close down because Microsoft was turning to Microsoft Teams, which nobody likes.
Nobody likes.
And if you do want to log on to Skype, you've got one more day because it's closing tomorrow.
So I've got credit with Skype?
Yeah, so what Microsoft is doing is that all your Skype contacts, all your messages, all your credit and data should be able to be transferred to Microsoft Teams.
So they
free.
do that, do they?
I think you do have to sort of manually log in with your Skype details.
Right.
And you don't have much longer to do that.
But I don't really understand this, because I use Skype if I'm calling abroad. That was the only reason I ever used it. So can I do that with Teams?
Yes, you can. However, the messaging has been really confusing because Microsoft Teams was sort of a replacement for Skype Business.
Yes.
And normal users, I don't think normal users want to use Teams at all.
No, they don't.
But this is a constant thing with Microsoft.
So why are they doing it?
They're flip-flopping between different services. Like, remember MSN?
Yes.
I used to love MSN Messenger. Brilliant thing. And then And then when they brought Skype, Skype was supposed to be the replacement for MSN, and now Teams is the replacement for Skype. I think the lesson is, if you want your company to survive, don't be bought out by Microsoft.
Well, I think that's a very good thing. Now, let's talk about this human workers AI story.
Yeah, so are you familiar with Duolingo?
Yes. It keeps telling me I haven't done my Spanish homework.
Yeah, apparently. So some people have like 1,000-day streaks, like on Duolingo, and they are boycotting the company. They're actually, on May 10, there's a mass boycott of the app because they're going to replace their contract workers who create all of the voice lessons with AI.
Oh, I see.
Now, Duolingo claims to be a very sort of like forward-thinking company. They were one of the first language apps, to transition from websites to being on your phone. And now they're like, the AI revolution is here, and obviously people are not pleased because, to be fair, Duolingo doesn't have the best lessons.
Doesn't it?
No, because their lessons are like, I would like to buy that red chair over there.
It's well, that's a thing I would say.
It's not language that anyone actually uses.
I would like to buy that red chair over there.
So to replace that sort of like language with AI-made lessons, I feel won't be that different.
No, fair enough, fair enough.
So,
now, I got excited when I saw this one. Officials concerned, but we've talked a great deal. As you know, I have a Tesla. It still doesn't do what it was meant to do after 8 years, this blinking thing. Does it drive autonomously? Absolutely not. Now, apparently, we've got a driverless lorry.
Yes, so apparently, did you know that there is a massive shortage of lorry drivers here in the UK? There's 300,000 people driving lorries, and we need 100,000 more. So clearly, we do sort of need to begin to move towards driverless lorries. However, well, if there is such a driver shortage and there's actually a decrease in...
Why don't we train more drivers?
I think the fact is that people don't want to be lorry drivers anymore, unfortunately. Well, there's this company called Aurora in the US, and they've actually started the first commercialized lorry routes in Texas.
I can understand that. You've got massive freeways, haven't you? And of course they're straight through the middle of nowhere. And so I can understand driverless lorries. I can't imagine them navigating the M25 or the M11.
Yeah, I'd be very concerned about that as well. And also we've got issues about phantom braking. And that's terrifying enough with cars where you're driving along the motorway and then all of a sudden your Tesla or other driverless car will just brake suddenly.
Yes.
Like, for no reason, apparently. Imagine if your lorry did that.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be terrifying. Obviously, the technology is different.
So that's very interesting. So I've just had another blinking update, which I can't bear. And now it keeps telling me I haven't got my hands on the wheel, but I have.
Yes.
Have you heard this at all?
OK, so this is apparently, it's to reduce people buying different plastic sort of gadgets to put on the steering wheel that simulates your hands. But the software, obviously, clearly isn't very good in your case.
It isn't very good. Dave, it's always a pleasure. Thanks ever so much. Really good to see you. Now, just before we go to a break, we need to apologise for a mistake with one of the straps. That is the text that you are seeing on the screen. And then, after the break, we'll be back with some voice notes, also your calls. It will be the end of the show, so lots still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
The thing is this, if he was coming over to visit his father, the king, he would get royal protection because he'd be going to the royal estates, so he would be absolutely fine. If he was coming to do proper business, like a state visit, although he's not a working royal anymore, again, there are provisions made from that. But he decided to go be a private citizen in a different country. So if he can now demand legally to have armed protection, then what's stopping Beyonce from doing the same? What's stopping Richard Gere from saying he needs the same? I need my people to carry guns. And he wants the tax, well, he doesn't want the taxpayer to pay for this. He said, well, I would pay you back.
where's the time gone? 9:55. Let's get some voice notes. Elaine is on the line. Good morning.
Morning, David. Elaine here. Yes, I think we should ban the burqa. There's so much of this terrorism going on. You don't know who's underneath those. And not only that, you can't go to any other country and wear what you like. I remember going to Turkey once and there was a man went in the supermarket and he didn't have a T-shirt on and he got told to go out and put a T-shirt on. I mean, they just come here and do what they like. And yes, they should ban the burqa. Good show, David. Bye for now.
Thanks very much, Elaine. Lisa next.
Good morning, David. It's Lisa from Canterbury. Listening to you talk about the weight loss jabs. It's weight loss is never ever as easy as people think it is. I never suffered ever at all until menopause. Going to the gym 4 or 4 times a week, eating clean, not eating, you know, your white bread, your rice, all of those things. Cut all of that down. And although I haven't got any medical conditions, I never lost even half a pound. So eating less, moving more is a real lack of understanding with a lot of people's issues. And most of my friends and family are all on it, look fantastic, feel fantastic, and it's a real game changer. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, next up, Jonathan.
Hi, David. This is Jonathan here from Berlin. I've just listened to this James Matheson's definition of common sense, and I'm sort of speechless. You know, common sense is the everyday judgment we use without thinking. That's why they call it common, because it's common to the number of people who believe in it. It's practical and it's intuitive. It's something that this Mr. Matheson doesn't seem to have himself.
Thanks ever so much, Jonathan, for that. Thank you to all of you for your voice notes. Peter Cardwell, good morning.
Hello there, how are you?
I'm very well. I was about to do it in your accent, but I thought better.
No, probably not. Leave that to Jeremy Kyle.
Yeah, oh, really? Yes. How are you?
Yeah, well
how
done.
are you, by the way?
I'm very well.
Good.
I'm very well. I'm very surprised that you've talked about the Reform victory there.
Boom, shakalaka.
Can we scrape you off the ceiling?
No, well, look, I mean, I think by any metric it was a good
Of course it was.
night.
Yeah, it was a fantastic day.
Many nights.
For them, and of course the fallout continues.
Doesn't it just?
Yeah, just after the news we'll be talking to Tim Montgomery, the big row over Lucy Powell, Leader of the House of Commons.
Unbelievable.
I mean, yeah, she said, talked about even mentioning the grooming gang scandal. Let's face it, it's the rape gang scandal. It was a dog whistle issue. We'll be talking to Tim about that. We'll also be
whether she should resign.
Well, we'll ask the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, that at a little bit later on in the programme. We've got our debate desk as well, loads to talk about. Do young people need a moral re-education? That's what Reform UK is saying. We'll talk to the co-chairman of the Conservative Party as well. Remember them?
No, I don't.
It's all gone horribly wrong.
Do they still exist?
They do, forgotten but not gone. And